R-E-S-S-L-I-N, that's wrestling. Well, I love to watch the missing link bang his head on a corner post, and the romper bumper butt delivered by the Iceman. The Freebirds, Roberts, Hayes, and Gardy, but what I like the most is Kerry delivering the Iron Claw as only the Von Erichs can.
Welcome back for a special edition of This Is Wrestling. Zach McGibbon taking you through this special edition. Many may remember from last year, we talked about the 2024 class of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, going through all the results and going through this upcoming guest's picks as well for his submissions for the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. And we got a lot of great feedback on it. It was something different from our usual coverage of WWE and AEW and everything else going on in professional wrestling. Something different, looking at the historical angle of certain wrestlers and their contributions to the wrestling history. And so we figured we'd bring it back this year. And then I saw this man's ballot as we're recording on the final day of submissions for the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. I saw this man's ballot and I said, oh, we got to separate this out because there's a lot to break down on this man's ballot. Returning this year to talk about the 2025 Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame ballot. He is a writer for F4W Online and the WrestlingObserver.com website. It's our champion as well, and I know he has been knocking on our door waiting for his opportunity to defend that title. It is, of course, Pastor Josiah MacDonald. Josiah, thank you so much for coming on the show here on I don't know how it is over there in Ottawa, but it's a little bit cloudy over here in Belleville.
It is also cloudy here. It's been cloudy for a few days here in Ottawa.
Just a few days, nothing too crazy. I know that we got an alert recently that we're going to get some snow for the first time.
I got the same alert today, 5 to 15 centimeters of snow, so I'm keeping an eye on that, depending on how bad the weather is. We may have to... I think we'll probably still go ahead with our church service tomorrow, but we'll see.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I got an alert yesterday that was maybe, who knows, potentially, but likely of 2 to 10 centimeters of snow over here. I don't know if it has updated since then, but that is what we are anticipating for the region. But Josiah, thanks again for coming on. Again, we had a lot of great feedback last year in terms of our breakdown of a lot of different candidates, and again, something different for this show. And we sometimes when it's the fall, especially in professional wrestling, there's a lot going on in the sports world, and it feels like sometimes professional wrestling takes a step back in the fall. It's nice to be able to talk about something different, and I think a little evergreen in a weird way when it comes to the Observer Hall of Fame.
Yeah, because it's nice to have something fun to talk about after the unfortunate loss of our Blue Jays.
Yes. Oh man, don't even get me started on that.
Oh man, it was a great baseball game, but I can be objective in that. But my gosh, what a devastating loss.
Yeah. Still not over the fact that we were 2 outs away from winning the World Series there.
We were so close.
So
man.
close.
Oh man.
So close.
Oh gosh. I was so sad at the end of that game, but it wasn't a kind of sad. I'm also a Leafs fan. Boo, I know.
Oh boy.
But I when the Leafs lose in the playoffs, they usually choke. The Blue Jays didn't choke during this game. They played really, really well.
It was just an unfortunate series of circumstances that came up during that game, and it's just, it's a weird thing because I'm usually anti-Toronto sports and usually the pro-Ottawa homer. But in this case, when it comes to the Blue Jays, the lone baseball team in Canada, I was just hooting and hollering and rooting this team along, and I have never felt so much heartbreak for a loss in the playoffs like I did with the Blue Jays this past week. I am still not over it. All I've seen have been edits of the Toronto Blue Jays. And just the season that was with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette and Trey Savage's performances during this playoff run were unreal too.
Gosh.
So it's just
a tremendous season, and hopefully that's just the beginning of good things.
Yes, hopefully they're able to keep some players around for next year too, because I think they want to run it back. The Shane Bieber signing locking in his player option helps with that a lot. That gives me a lot of confidence.
Yes, and I think keeping some of the guys that are in the lineup, if they can keep them, because they have a great lineup, and these guys are still fairly young.
Yep.
So it's gonna be a great lineup going forward next year as well if you can keep most of the same people.
Yeah, and if Springer can play at a high level too,
Yes.
really and he's somebody that delivers in the playoffs. There's a lot to be excited for, but I am still heartbroken about what happened in Game 7. I don't know
Yes.
it's tough to recover. So I don't know if
But,
I ever will fully recover from that, but
I'm not sure either because like I remember when the Jays won in '92 and '93. I was very young.
Yeah.
But that's like my first sports memory, one of my first, anyways.
Yep.
And winning back to back, I remember both of those, and I was like, "Oh, please happen again." But here we are. But hey, on to better things when we talk about the joys of the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame.
That's right, because it's a different kind of season. It's Observer Hall of Fame season, and so like last year, there are multiple sections in the Hall of Fame ballot. Going to be different from our recording last year because obviously we do not know the results of who was voted in quite yet for the Hall of Fame. And so this is going to be a little bit different because I saw you shared your ballot with me last night as we're recording and taking a look, and you have expanded out this ballot, my friend. You were able to vote in every single category in the Hall of Fame ballot, and so I'm really excited to break it all down. So for our listeners, there is about 6 different categories. There's the modern performers, which we'll start off with. There's the historical performers in Canada, US. There is the wrestling in Japan candidates, wrestling in Mexico candidates, wrestling in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, Africa section. All those different areas combined into one.
One section.
In one section, it makes it very tough. And then the non-wrestlers section, which is also going to be very interesting conversation. So, and there's a lot of names to get through on this ballot. So let's go right into it. I'll first start off with those modern performers in US, Canada candidates. And
well, before we get too deep into it, we should remind your listeners of how the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame works.
That's right.
So it requires 66% of the vote, and the people who vote are current wrestlers, retired wrestlers, journalists, and historians. I am under the latter category, the historian category. And so it is people like we don't know all the public votes on this, but we do know there are people in the business voting. I mean, every top name wrestler gets a ballot, basically. And they get a chance to vote in this every year. And it is the only Hall of Fame in wrestling that follows similar rules to the MLB Hall of Fame. That's what it's modeled after. And it requires a very high threshold to get in. And so it is a very legitimate Hall of Fame in wrestling. It's not the only one, but it is certainly a legitimate one that is voted on, and the only one that is voted on by wrestlers, active and retired journalists, and historians. And so now we can get into that modern category.
That's right. And so in that modern category, you are allowed to select 6 people maximum in this category. I'll list off the names here, and then we'll get to who you select in this category. The names here in the modern performers in US, Canada candidates: Mark and Jay Briscoe, Edge/Adam Copeland, Bill Dundee, who kind of seems like an outlier in the modern performers, that Bill Dundee is here in this category, but nonetheless, he is in this category. FTR, Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, Bill Goldberg, Samoa Joe, Matt and Jeff Hardy, Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, Mercedes Moné/Sasha Banks, Jon Moxley, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, Randy Orton, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, who's returning to the ballot this year, Sabu making a return to the ballot as well, Trish Stratus, and Rick and Scott Steiner of the Steiner Brothers. And so we now turn it over to you, Josiah. Who were your selections in the modern performers in US, Canada?
So this year was, I have one less vote to work with than last year, because I think it's based by the number of people in the category.
Yep.
And when we had Roman Reigns and others going in last year, they're not on the ballot anymore, and the Young Bucks and whatnot. So I had to make a difficult choice because some of the same votes I had last year are still going to be continuing this year. But I had to cut one because Sabu was added to the ballot, and the Briscoes were there, and all that. I unfortunately I felt really bad about this, but I had to take Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus off my ballots
Mm.
because I needed to make room for someone else. And in this case, I felt like the priority had to go to Sabu, where he has passed away and just added back to the ballot. He is one of the most influential wrestlers of all time. He is not the greatest worker of all time, but he is heavily, heavily influential. And I think we need to consider how he has inspired so many people. Like table bumps exist because this guy brought them to North America in a way that no one else has. And so I had to vote for Sabu. But here is my list of candidates that I voted for.
Mm-hmm.
I voted for Mark and Jay Briscoe, the Briscoe brothers. While they were not big name tag team in a major promotion, they were consistently for over 20 years the top tag team in Ring of Honor, except for it's them and the Young Bucks. And they had so many awesome matches, both as individuals and together. I mean, the last thing they did was that trilogy with FTR, which was incredible in Ring of Honor. If you've never seen it, go watch that trilogy between the Briscoe brothers and FTR. If you think these guys can't do old school wrestling, you have no idea. It was a violent, vicious territory style wrestling with those matches. It was awesome.
Especially the dog collar match which is still one of my favorite tag matches I've ever seen. It's unbelievable.
That dog collar match was incredible. Incredible. It was like right out of Starrcade 1985 in many ways, but with more modern twists.
Mm-hmm.
Samoa Joe, I had to vote for. I've been a Joe fan for I don't know how long now, since 2003, I think, maybe 2004, when I first saw him in Ring of Honor. I was in high school when I first started watching Samoa Joe, and, or at least hearing of him. And then I was probably 18 or 19 when I first started watching Ring of Honor. So, yeah, I was still a teenager. I might have been my first year of university. But I started watching Samoa Joe, and I thought, this guy's the man. And that opinion has not changed, as evidenced by how awesome his promos have been, even on Dynamite this past week. I am a big Samoa Joe fan, so I had to vote for him. Next up is Jon Moxley. I think Moxley carrying AEW the way he has over the last 6 years has solidified him as a top-level candidate. Then after that was CM Punk. I had to vote in favor of Punk. I've tried to remove my own bias here. I don't like some of the stuff that ended in how his run in AEW ended. It just left a sour taste in my mouth.
Right.
But I'm still a CM Punk fan. I still like the guy. I like the wrestler, the performer. I enjoy watching him. And when his return came to AEW, he was a major draw there. He's had a very good run in WWE since then. I think that has solidified him as a candidate. And then next is Cody Rhodes, who has been the face of WWE now for several years. And I think Cody Rhodes has earned that spot. And then, of course, Sabu.
There you go. So that is the list there. And so there's a couple names that are carrying over from last year, I see. I'm not going to delve too much into the CM Punk Cody Rhodes argument because, one, I think it's a pretty clear argument for both of those wrestlers.
Yes.
That they should probably go in.
And it has not changed since last year.
Yeah. It's if anything, it's actually grown their case since the last year that they should probably be in. I was listening back to the audio a little bit, and it was kind of funny. From last year, and I pushed back because Roman Reigns went in last year, and I had kind of pushed back on the Roman Reigns selection because I still feel like to this day, even a year later, my opinion hasn't really changed. That I think it's more he representing the company, and he's not as big of a star as it's made to be. But I look at Cody Rhodes, and I see that guy to me is the main star and the guy that you could put onto a marquee and sells a lot of tickets, and you notice things change with Cody Rhodes. And in the last year, that hasn't changed. My opinion hasn't changed on that at all. It's Cody Rhodes is pretty much a lock for me. I feel like he has to get in. And then CM Punk as well. I mentioned it last year. I think with what we saw with him in AEW, his return, the business that he was able to put together when he came back, selling out an arena with without even having his name, just a mere mention of his name, people were saying, oh, he's probably going to show up, and he was able to fill out that arena. And you look at the pay-per-view buys when he was there, and then you see him come to WWE and the business that he was able to put together in his return to WWE as well. I think he's a solidified lock at this point. So I don't think there's too much to argue here when it comes to Punk and Rhodes. Looking back, it's interesting, the Jon Moxley case, because it's funny. He's won, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I know he's won the Luthez Wrestler of the Year in the Wrestling Observer Awards a couple of times now for his work in AEW. And as you mentioned, he's been solid and reliable. And I think it's only he and maybe one other wrestler, or I think it might just be him at this point, that remains out of the Hall of Fame who had won the Wrestler of the Year in the Observer Awards. So it's interesting with Moxley for me, because it's like, I don't think he is this big time draw like the likes of Punk or Rhodes, but he is this sort of steady presence, and there is certainly an importance factor to him jumping from WWE to AEW when it was a startup, and giving it the legitimacy at the time when he jumped to All Elite Wrestling. And there's a lot to say in terms of his wrestling style. You always hear it with people in terms of the deathmatch style being brought to a more prominent audience in AEW. I think his case is very interesting in terms of, does he go in right away, or is he somebody that his case is still kind of building where you can really solidify it for some people? But in your case, you look at it, you see Jon Moxley, and you see that he has solidified himself as a Hall of Famer.
Yes, I think he's very early in that stage. Like, I think his case is still solidifying, but it's enough for me. And really, that's what it comes down to when it comes to these votes.
Yep.
And with Moxley, he's such an interesting case because, I mean, it was clear he was a top guy in WWE, but he was never the guy. And Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns were always the guys ahead of him. And honestly, that might have been to the detriment of WWE in some ways. But Vince saw Jon Moxley as this wacky guy, and Moxley is this pro wrestler's pro wrestler in many ways. He's very much, and this might make some people angry, but he's very much so a modern Terry Funk, in that he's going to try to do everything well and try to do everything he can to elevate everyone around him. Is he the worker Terry Funk was? Probably not, because that would be quite the claim.
Yeah.
But
that would have me racing to the polls to get a bid to the Hall of Fame right away.
Right. If he was the worker of Terry Funk, 100%. But he's not the same level of worker as Terry Funk, but he's still very good. Like, let's not diminish this. And we talk about the deathmatch thing, but when you watch his matches that are not death matches, he's actually really great.
Yep.
Like, he doesn't have a bad match very often. And usually if it does, it's because it's following someone who was so absolutely exceptional, like a Will Ospreay or a Young Bucks or a Kenny Omega. Like, it's hard to follow those guys.
Yep.
But when I look at the matches he had with Darby Allin lately, they were all really good. You can argue about that last death match, the I Quit match, but that was the least violent, most almost violent, kind of scary death match I've ever seen.
Yes.
Because it was all the illusion of violence.
Right.
While there was actually none of it, which to me, that was actually smarter than actually doing the violence.
Yeah.
Because, like, they didn't do anything with the skewers. They just made it look like they did.
Yep.
They didn't do the fish tank thing. Well, Visceral.
Yep.
Was actually not dangerous at all. His head was underwater for less time than you do when you go bobbing for apples. But the visual of it is extreme. I will totally admit that, and I can understand why that would be a turnoff to people. But from a work perspective, they did nothing dangerous in this match except for when Darby was tossed to the announce table by Claudio.
Right. Which is still quite the visual too.
Which is quite the visual again, right?
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing exceptionally dangerous except for that one spot. Like, so from a work rate perspective, I looked at that and I went, this was one of the most brilliantly worked death matches that had no death that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely something.
There was like no blood, and it was a blood capsule for a little bit.
Right.
You know, I just look at it and I thought, from a work perspective, I went, they really came up with some clever stuff to make you think this was the most violent match of all time, while it was perfectly safe. And I thought that was really cool. But again, not my cup of tea. I hate deathmatch wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But from a work rate perspective, I went, that was really clever. But I look at his most recent run as AEW World Champion. Really, it started off a little rough with some of the matches, largely because he was following guys like Will Ospreay.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like he did that no DQ match with Copeland after the pay-per-view to show that he could have a good world title match
Right.
on TV. And that was a nice make good from him and Tony Khan and Copeland. But he turned it around at the end. Like the Death Rider stuff really turned around as it led into the Hangman feud.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the work he did in helping promote that, and the fact that title, I don't know why this worked. That title was not seen for like 10 months or whatever it was.
Yep.
That worked because that got a massive pop when Hangman took it out of the briefcase. and you know, the guy is very creative. He has a vision for what he wants pro wrestling to be, and not just the violence aspect, but like this guy is as old school as it gets when it comes to promos and build and that kind of stuff. And you look at the Hangman feud, which I personally, the feud with Hangman is my feud of the year. People can disagree on that, and that's fine. But that's the one I enjoyed the most. And in the build up to that, when he put Hangman over, he put him over in the most strongest terms possible. And I thought that was brilliant. And now Hangman's the top babyface in AEW, largely because of the work Jon Moxley did in building that feud. And I mean, Hangman was kind of always that anyways, but this has kind of put him over the top because his first run was really, it wasn't what it should have been.
Yeah.
And this run really feels like this is Hangman as the guy.
Yeah, this is going to be the legacy defining title run potentially for Hangman Page, because the first one, as you mentioned, that was more like just to say, hey, this is a guy that we are pushing and he's going to be familiar to people, and it could have been more, absolutely, but that was more of a, this is a guy that we're looking to be a featured player in the future. And it really did feel like it was setting up for later that, okay, this next title reign after he loses it, because he's going to get the belt again, this is going to be one of those title reigns that's going to be like, okay, what do we have here in Hangman Page?
And his character's journey, since he lost the title to Punk, then going forward to today, has been very compelling television. Mm-hmm. And Jon Moxley was a significant part of that on both sides of those feuds. Like one of his early feuds in AEW, he had a very violent series of matches with Hangman. And then he goes and has this feud, which is a very violent series of matches with Hangman. It seems like these two are kind of like Moxley's kind of positioned as the villain, and Hangman's kind of positioned as the guy who's the hero, and they always seem to find each other at some point. They're definitely generational rivals. And without that, we wouldn't have 30,000 plus seats sold in Texas. You know, thereabouts. And that's pretty darn good for a the second company. Not that was the largest gate outside of a WrestleMania, and outside of WWE in North America ever.
Yeah.
I know we talk about money stuff, whatever, but we're just talking drawing ability.
Yep.
So Moxley was a significant part of that.
Yep, for sure. That really helps his case the last year in terms of being in the main event of the big, the biggest non-WWE pay-per-view stadium event in wrestling history in North America. So yeah. I think he has to have some credit for that. Obviously, you could throw Heyman in there as well. But yeah, I think that certainly helps his case. And so it's interesting because for some, I hear, I need even more with Moxley, and you could argue that he's still kind of in his prime. And this is one of the tough parts about the modern performers category, is that a lot of these guys, you're still seeing them out there wrestling today. And in some cases, you're still seeing their primes being played out. And so you
Right.
have some ideas of some voters saying, well, I'm not really going to vote for them now because I don't see they're not done their prime yet. But
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, that Moxley case. I think his name is going to continue to grow in terms of support over the next couple of years. So I wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was an interesting name.
Yeah, because I think that is the most interesting case out
Yeah.
of all those. And I mean, obviously Sabu for Sabu reasons.
Yeah.
But
Well, let's talk about Sabu. Like, I think Sabu is a very interesting name when he came on. Obviously, his unfortunate passing, and I recommend people go back and listen to the episode we did, what Lee and I did about Sabu's passing, because Lee was somebody that saw Sabu in his prime, hearing about him through the magazines and going to the ECW shows and seeing Sabu live in person, and you hear all about Sabu, and you just see the visual of him as well, right? And just how he was so different from everybody else. And you touched on it when you were talking about your selection with Sabu. Like, he was somebody that kind of brought the table spot into the big, like, it's now common in professional wrestling, the table spot, because that was something that Sabu did when he brought it into his arsenal of moves and matches. So as there's a big influence case here when it comes to Sabu. There's not too much on a drawing case, obviously, because a lot of the times when he would go to the bigger companies, he was never really fully brought to its potential. When he went to a WCW, for example, he was there for like a month. And then you go look at his stuff in WWE after ECW was bought, with the rebirth of ECW into WWE ECW. And there's a lot there in terms of his runs in the bigger companies that you would hope for there would be more for. But I think the main case for Sabu and why you're seeing a lot of people vote for him is that influence case, because he was somebody that nobody had seen before when he, jumped to the scene. I think just to give perspective here when it came to Sabu, he was somebody that finished second in the Wrestler of the Year category in 1994. And this was on the independents he was able to do this. Behind Kenta Kobashi, I believe, was the winner of that 1994 Wrestler of the Year. So,
like, that should put that in perspective.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
One of the greatest workers ever.
Yeah, and Sabu was behind him. He was ahead of other guys like Misawa and Kawada and Bret Hart. It was in 94. Shawn Michaels. Like, that really kind of puts it into perspective of just how much of a thing Sabu was in 1994, 1995. And then obviously later on, I think it's fair to say he kind of becomes a parody of himself. And that might be a harsh thing, but that's the only real phrase that I could come up with after 96, because then you kind of expect with a Sabu match that he's going to go in there, he's going to use the chair to dive to the outside, or he's going to use a table for his match. He's not going to be the cleanest worker in the world. But for a time, like, Sabu caught so many wrestling fans, especially in an era of time in pro wrestling where you had everything changing. The WWF, WCW was starting to come into the Nitro era pretty soon, but there were still some things that wrestling fans were kind of lacking with Nitro. And then you just have this guy in Sabu that just kind of breaks the mold and comes into the independents. And there's some great audio that's out there of people calling into Wade Keller's radio show, and these are like the smarkiest of the smarks you'll ever find calling in, and they're like, wow, I just saw this Sabu match. I forget who his opponent was. It might have been Chris Candido. I could be wrong. But he's like, oh, I just saw this Sabu match, and this just blew me away. That might be one of the greatest spectacles, greatest matches I've ever seen. And these are the smarkiest of the smarks that will, put down everything. So I think that really kind of puts it into perspective. And so it's interesting now to see where Sabu, how he's kind of being thought of with the voters.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I've only seen a lot of Sabu in retrospect. Because when I grew up, it was WCW and the WWF, and my first exposure to Sabu was when ECW invaded Raw, and I saw him fall off the Raw.
Yes, right.
Poor guy. Like, he wanted to do this dive, and then the letter was like, I don't know, it looked like it was like a cushion, but it was probably just like a little metal stand with a letter taped to it.
Yep.
And he fell off of it, and the poor guy probably almost died. But that was my first exposure to Sabu and the Sandman, and I never forgot that from childhood.
Right.
To the point that I realized Hardcore Hack in WCW was the Sandman when he showed up. And so I recognized these guys, and that was my first exposure to them. And then I started to watch Sabu in TNA, and then I went back and managed to watch a lot of old ECW, and I realized this guy was pretty special. He was not the best worker, but everything he did got over. And the lights would go out, and he comes out, and then he's in the ring, or he would come out in the straitjacket, being dragged out in ECW by Paul Heyman wearing the Hannibal Lecter mask.
Right.
And then they would let him go in the ring, and then him and Taz will kill each other for 20 minutes.
Yep.
And it was like, this is wild. And it was like, contextually at that point, like, because by the 2000s you've kind of seen everything. But I realized this was in 1994 when nobody was doing this stuff, and 93, and when he came into ECW, they really pushed him as this guy who was pushing the boundaries, and he was really pushing the boundaries in Japan from like 1990 onwards. Terry Funk loved working with him.
Yep.
Leave it to Terry Funk to see where the modern wrestling is going.
Yep.
Because he's the guy who always did. And he wanted him brought into ECW, and they had that I actually watched the triple threat, the very first, I think it was the first triple threat in North America. It was Shane Douglas, Terry Funk, and Sabu, and they went to a 1-hour draw, and it was awesome. In retrospect, like, you can watch it now, it's not the same work rate or anything like that. And, the match was a little sloppy, and these guys are trying to figure out how to work with 3 people for an hour. But ECW was doing stuff that was way ahead of the game then. And in the match itself, really, when I say it was awesome, it wasn't like a tremendous match or anything like that, but it was very unique for the time. No one else was doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
And then you combine all the stuff that Sabu was doing with Taz, and then you even fast forward to his tag team with Rob Van Dam in ECW. That tag team was great. Yes, he may have been a bit of a parody of himself by that point, as you said, at post 1996. But I mean, he still did a lot of great stuff with RVD for leading up to about 2000, when he left ECW for XPW, which did not go well for him.
Nope.
And then of course, ECW eventually went out of business, but then he started showing up in TNA, and he had an okay run in TNA off and on over the years. And then really it just kind of petered out his career. But the one thing I can say about Sabu is it was a long-running joke on Twitter. Whenever the lights go out, people would say, "It's Sabu!"
Yep. That's right.
And there's a reason for that. It's because it was associated with him.
Yeah.
You can do this with anyone else, but when those lights go out, you have that instinct and you think for a second, it's got to be Sabu.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys that unfortunately never made it on the big stage. But when you count his influence, you look at the table breaking in the hardcore matches, you look at the crazy dives to the outside, barbed wire matches were brought to North America because of him and Terry Funk.
Yep.
You look at some of the ultra violence you see in death matches, and even just regular hardcore wrestling these days was brought by him. It was considered ultra violent when he brought it. Table break is not ultra violent anymore, but because it kind of happens on every show.
Yeah, which it could also, you can make an argument that's kind of a hindrance to his case for some people, because it's just so common now with the table break.
100%.
You can make an argument for it, and I personally wouldn't make that. And I'm somebody that, like, anybody that's listened to the show knows how I'm kind of done with a lot of these street fights that we see in modern wrestling nowadays. But I still think there is a lot in the case of Sabu that I think he is somebody that's worthy of getting in. And there are still matches that I look back to, obviously the series with Taz that kind of helped establish ECW. And one of my favorite matches coming from ECW was during the ECW Heatwave pay-per-view of 1998. And that was when he tagged with Rob Van Dam. You remind me of that partnership, and he took on
Jinsei
Hayabusa
Suzuki and Hayabusa.
and Jinsei Suzuki, right? And that was such a fun match to go back and watch. That whole pay-per-view was just a tremendous. Like, that is arguably ECW's best pay-per-view.
I think that's that one has Mike Awesome killing a guy too, right?
Yeah, that had that Masato Tanaka match, and
yes, that's it. Yes,
that was a tremendous match.
Sid came out for a little bit on that one too,
I believe.
Oh,
at the end, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch that show.
It's such a great show. You have Candido and Lance Storm on that show as well, and it's a great match.
Peak ECW. ECW.
That's absolutely the case. And so Sabu is absolutely an interesting case. The other selections you made here, I think we kind of touched on last year with Mark and Jay Briscoe and Samoa Joe. So I won't go too deep into that. I'd recommend people go back and listen to those. But just to kind of give like a quick synopsis, like in the case of Mark and Jay Briscoe, you touched on it at the top when you selected them. The longevity that they have as a tag team, and just how good they were, and for how long they were a tag team. It's just only the Bucks match it, right? And
yeah, it's really only the Young Bucks.
Yep.
And if the Young Bucks are going in, I mean, the Young Bucks are bigger draws and all that, of course.
Yep.
But the Briscoes should have been. AEW was tailor made for the Briscoes.
Yep.
And it is an absolute shame that Jay Briscoe died before they got to go on that stage.
Yep.
Because I think it was going to happen fairly soon at that point. But you even look at Mark now. Like, Mark Briscoe, has he had a bad match in AEW?
It's hard to think of one.
Like, he's awesome.
Yeah. The matches he's had with Kyle Fletcher are super underrated. I don't think it gets enough love.
So good.
Yeah.
That match with Kyle Fletcher, the last pay-per-view, was my favorite match in that show.
Yeah, it was very, very good.
And it wasn't for everyone else, but it was my favorite.
Yeah.
And the tag match with Kesha and Okada.
Yep.
But you look how the body of work these guys have, both as singles wrestlers and as a tag team. When you watch the Briscoes team, they are so smooth. The only guys I can compare them to is the Young Bucks, and it's ironic because they are legitimate brothers in both cases. They just seem to have like an innate understanding of what the other person was going to do without any effort.
Right.
And you go back to 2002 and you watch a Ring of Honor in that first year before, because Mark couldn't wrestle right away. He was too young. He was 17. And in Philly, they didn't let you wrestle until you were 18. Although Mark was wrestling elsewhere on the indies with his brother. But once they started off in Ring of Honor as a team, he came out as the manager of Jay for a little bit. These guys were that good back then. They became better workers in terms of like how to structure a match and stuff like that as they went on.
Mm-hmm.
But you watch the smoothness of their work, and everything they did was just like they just instantly got it. And of course, it helps that they were wrestling since they were like 15. But they're tremendous workers, and God bless Jay. It's such a tragedy that he died, and Mark is tremendous and still I would argue, one of the better workers in wrestling today. And if you watch him work, everything he does gets over. And it's the same thing it's the story of the Briscoes. Everything they did worked.
Yep.
And they only got better as time went on, and they are the most legendary tag team in Ring of Honor history. If there was ever first ballot Hall of Famers for Ring of Honor, it is them.
Yep.
Maybe Low-Key and Samoa Joe and CM Punk. Like, those are the other ones. Danielson, I suppose.
Yep.
And maybe Christopher Daniels. Like, those are the kind of the core guys.
Yep.
And you look at them and you go, they kept Ring of Honor alive for a long time. It was them and Jay Lethal.
Yep.
Then outside of the Bullet Club involvement, which obviously helped.
Yeah.
But
Jay Briscoe being the champ was what got me into Ring of Honor in the 2010s. When it was the race,
Yep.
when he was trying to go after Jay Lethal's title.
Yes.
So,
that was so good.
Yeah, that was a good series as well. And then learning about their tag team with Mark and being like, wow, this is this is a tag team right here, the Briscoe brothers. So yeah, there's a strong case there, and the more I look at it, the more I'm like, man, this is a Hall of Fame tag team. Every time I look at it, it's such a shame, as you mentioned, that their run was cut short because of Jay's unfortunate passing. But it is, I think what the body of work that they were able to put in, the longevity that they were able to do it for, especially as a tag team, I think is something commendable. So, and then the other one was Samoa Joe, where quickly, I think every place that Samoa Joe goes to eventually finds a way to the top of the card. And he's always a main event guy. Yeah. Always finds a way, whether it be in Ring of Honor, whether it be in TNA, where he also has a case for having TNA's top pay-per-view buys when he main evented with Kurt Angle. And when Angle debuted in TNA, he goes to WWE and he works his way up. He has a match with Brock Lesnar on the pay-per-view. How could you forget Great Balls of Fire there, Josiah, in terms of the pay-per-view name? And so you have that match.
I had forgotten the name, but I remembered the match.
Yes. How could you forget Great Balls of Fire? It was practically everywhere at that time.
It was a terrible name.
It's an awful name. They never brought it back. I hope that Nick Khan and Triple H, in their quest to find more pay-per-view names, bring back Great Balls of Fire. But nonetheless, and then of course it goes to AEW. And at the time, I was thinking, oh, Joe, he had a great run, and now he's going to AEW. He's probably there to help Ring of Honor now that Tony Khan has bought it. And lo and behold, he finds his way.
Retirement run.
Yeah, exactly. And lo and behold, he finds a way to get to the top of the card again and becomes the world champion for AEW.
He beats MJF, and he has a 4-month awesome title reign.
Yeah, and he's currently in a feud with Hangman Page right now as we're recording.
For the world title.
Yeah, it is something.
Like he's remarkable. And then you go back and watch his early stuff. He does a few things that back then that he doesn't do now.
Yep.
But largely, he still works exactly the same way.
Yep. There's a point in time where you could make an argument that Samoa Joe was one of, if not the best wrestler in the world in 2005.
Yeah, I was about to say 2005. He was unbelievable.
The Kenta Kobashi match is still a match I go back and watch all the time.
Dude, that match is so good.
So good. It's so good when they name the event after your match.
Yes. The event is just Joe versus Kobashi.
Yeah, you know what you're getting. It's like, all right, I'm in. Joe versus Kobashi, I'm in.
And that's what sold the tickets. That's the reason I watched the show, right? I have friends from the Maritimes who drove down to New York. So we're talking like a 10+ hour drive.
Wow.
Just to see that show.
Wow.
And because they knew Joe versus Kobashi was going to rule.
Yes. And boy did it. It still lives on. Still a match I go back and watch.
So good.
So that's so those are your picks. Before we get out of the modern performers in US, Canada, you kind of touched on a little bit some of the names that were kind of on the cutting line for you. So who are some names that you're looking at, and depending on how the voting results go, that you might be looking at to try and make it into your performers? Or do you see it as these are my top 6, that these are what I'm going to roll with, and we'll see what happens next year?
Well, I'm fairly certain Cody Rhodes is going in this year. I'm fairly certain Sabu is probably going to go in.
Mm-hmm.
He's been on the ballot a lot over the years, and I think it's finally time for Sabu to go in. I think those core 4 that would otherwise, the Briscoes, Joe, Moxley, and Punk, they will stay on my ballot. I would like to bring Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus back on my ballot.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for influential women's wrestlers that are on the modern era anyways, they are 2 of the most influential. And the fact that Trish is still, when she comes back, she works at a high level still, and she's almost 50 years old now. I think there's a lot to be said about the 2 of them for bringing high quality women's wrestling to North America, and also proving women can be a draw.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they do need to go in eventually. I don't think they'll drop off the ballot anytime soon. That's why I felt comfortable not dropping them off my ballot, because I'm certain they're going to remain on the ballot for years to come. But they will go in eventually, those 2. It's just a matter of this year I had to vote Sabu, and I had to drop 1 vote. So, I had 7 votes last year. I only have 6 this year for this candidate or this category. And so I had to drop 1, and then I had to switch out 1, and I felt like Sabu had to jump in.
There you go. So I can hear the Becky Lynch argument for sure. I've heard the argument in terms of like being the top wrestler, not just women's wrestler, like top, like recognizable wrestler in the wrestling world for a time period, especially with the history of the professional wrestling business. I think that is a legitimate argument to make when it comes to Becky Lynch, especially from an influence case. And then obviously you look at the 4 horsewomen, and and a name I'm gonna mention in a moment after I make this point that I'm interested to hear your thoughts on. The name I'm gonna push back on a little bit. This is gonna be the first one. I was waiting for the one I wanted to push back on from last year, because we had the big Roman Reigns debate last year. This one for me is I'm gonna push back on is Trish Stratus a little bit.
Okay.
I think her contributions, it's weird with WWE in terms of their women's wrestlers and how they push it, because it feels like there's kind of 15 different people that they say were influential to women's wrestling in WWE. And, and to me, I don't see the argument with Trish Stratus personally. I think she's a solid enough wrestler. She improved, obviously a Canadian icon. So I know I'm pushing back against a Canadian here, and that's not going to be a great look for me. But but I think it's
in this economy.
In this economy, exactly. I know it's not. I'm going against the grain here, but I don't think her influence is as strong. Like I don't think there's much of a case here for Trish Stratus, if I'm being quite honest. Like I look at the Raw main event, obviously with Lita, but I other than the Mickie James match at WrestleMania, I really don't think there's this extensive catalog. Now you could make the argument that the division that she was in during that time was not very strong. Not a lot of strong women's wrestlers because of the way WWE was pushing its women's wrestlers at the time. And I could hear that argument, but I still think, I don't think her case is strong enough to be a Hall of Famer personally. Okay. I think the Becky Lynch case for sure, I can hear that argument. In fact, another name I'm surprised kind of wasn't in the mix, who I think actually has the strongest case of the 4 horsewomen, is Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks. Especially from an in-ring perspective. I think there's an in-ring argument and an influence argument. I wouldn't vote for her now because I still think there's more that could be done to establish her case. And I don't think she's a solidified Hall of Famer yet, but she is somebody that if the years go by and she has more of these incredible matches and she establishes herself as a draw in some cases. I know she had the initial draw for Big Business in Boston. And that helps sell a lot of tickets for AEW, so I could definitely see that argument there. But to me, of the women on the modern performers category, I think she has the strongest case, and then Becky Lynch after that. And it's going to be tough for Becky Lynch in the sense that other than that year, she hasn't really been able to do much after that. And, you know, that's due to a bunch of different factors in terms of WWE's booking of Becky Lynch at that time and just being insistent on making her a heel when she was not a heel, and then putting Charlotte Flair in the main event against in that 3-way match with Ronda Rousey as well. Like that was such a big mistake.
A horrible booking decision.
Just a big mistake. Like there's a lot of things, and that's not Becky's fault in those cases. That's just WWE. Like this is the latter stage of Vince McMahon running that company. And so it's tough. Those are tough things to go against Becky Lynch, but at the end of the day, those are the things I have to analyze when it comes to her case. And so there obviously could be a change. WWE, while I think they're kind of at the tail end of their hot period, they are still in a hot period right now, selling a lot of tickets. And Becky Lynch could be somebody that could prove that she is like a solidified star, but I'm not really seeing that right now. So those are kind of my arguments on that. You want me to get even more, stoke some flames here a little bit here, because this is what we do. We gotta get the takes out there. Josiah is.
We're full of hot takes here in cold Canada.
That's right. We got to keep ourselves warm somehow. And I think Bill Goldberg has a really strong case, and
that is not a hot take for me.
Okay, interesting, because I think it's a hot take for some. I think Bill Goldberg's got a really strong case.
It would be for some, but I think he was such a huge star in the period that he was a huge star. And then he had that tremendous return run against Brock Lesnar. I don't get me wrong. We're not talking about Brock here, but
right.
we're talking about Goldberg in that run. That was awesome. Like those 3 matches with Brock were great.
Yep, I love that series of matches.
I did too, and I was there live for when the squash match that started it,
Mhm.
and there was like maybe 2 angry people in the audience.
Yeah. I will say I was upset at first because, like, oh, I thought we were getting this big time main event, but over time, I'm like, man, it's something so different in WWE as opposed to like the standard matches you kind of see from them, and it's like this guy just came in and kicked ass, and
It was a Paul Heyman special
yes, absolutely,
because he definitely booked that. He convinced Vince to let Goldberg be Goldberg, and Brock convinced him.
Yep.
Because Brock wanted to do this. And then Goldberg goes in and crushes him in 10 seconds. I will never forget walking into that arena and people around me just singing Goldberg's name.
right.
And I went, this worked.
Yep.
And I was like, this cannot be the end of this. There's more to come. And I was right. And again, it was Paul Heyman booking special because Paul Heyman books everything Brock and Roman and that now.
Right.
And I like that to me, that and growing up watching Goldberg, I was like 11 years old when Goldberg started.
Mhm.
And when I saw him crush Lesnar in 2016, I was 11 again.
Right. Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I like being there live. It was like I got to see my childhood hero come back and do what my childhood hero did.
Right.
And for me, that's highly nostalgia based, 100%.
Yeah.
But it worked. And the thing with wrestling is, does it work? That's all that really matters in the end. Does it get over?
Yep.
And you cannot talk about the biggest stars of the 90s without talking about Goldberg.
Yep. And that was, and it was interesting because I was going to make that point too. It's interesting you make a lot of the case that's after his WCW run, because I think a lot of people look, when it comes to Bill Goldberg, at that brief period in 1998 into 99 where he was the top guy and very clearly on fire, and he was one of those defining figures of that era of professional wrestling, even if it was so short when he was on top. And I think that's why there's the pushback, because it's like, yes, he was on top of the wrestling world for such a short period.
But really, that was WCW's fault, not his.
Yep, for sure.
And we have learned not to hold Sting accountable for the failures of 91, 92.
Yep.
When he was the top guy there, it was the booking.
Yep, Sting's a great example, because he got voted in much later on, because there were people that were kind of holding it against Sting when it comes to the booking. I do think the booking does play a factor in some, where
100%.
And in the case of Goldberg, like, obviously it took him a while to kind of get back on and reestablish his case, because he has the run in WCW, and then he gets hurt after smashing his hand into the limo window and slices his hand open. Then he comes back and turns heel in 2000, which was just a among the many horrible decisions of WCW in 2000.
Russo turned Sting heel.
Yeah, Russo. We could do a whole episode of WCW 2000, but it's just unbelievable what happens in that year.
WCW had DNA.
Yeah. Oh, just crazy. And now Russo is back booking another company too in JCW there.
Gosh.
But that's a different episode. But then he goes to WWE, and then he just gets caught in the Triple H Reign of Terror, where he should have been dominant and just dominated everybody. And you got glimpses of it, especially in that Elimination Chamber match. But then he gets hit with that sledgehammer by Triple H at Survivor Series, and then it just totally kills off Goldberg. Then they put the wig on him, right? And it's just like, what are we doing here? You got Bill Goldberg here. He was one of those big stars in the 90s. But he really helps to establish his case in 2015, 16 onwards as a guy that kind of establishes his name. He's a prominent draw, has those matches with Brock. He wins the title. And even in his retirement match, which was hilarious that they cut it off on the TV end at the end, but still find that very funny. But he is able to draw a pretty big gate in terms of his final match in Atlanta. I think there's a lot here with Bill Goldberg. I'm not sitting here saying he's the greatest professional wrestler of all time either. Let's be clear. Like, this is not Lou Thez we're talking about here. But one of the things with the Hall of Fame is that you also have to look at drawing ability. And there are guys that are on this ballot where they might not be the greatest professional wrestlers, and we'll talk about that in the historical performers category, where they're not the greatest professional wrestlers, but boy, did they draw a lot of money. And that is something that you have to look at when it comes to the Observer Hall of Fame. And so to me, I think there's a really strong case here with Bill Goldberg from that standpoint.
Agreed. Because that short time he was at the top in the 90s, I think was further solidified by the fact that he drew big when he came back.
Yep.
After the horrendous WWE run in the early 2000s, 2002 to 2004. When he had that run against Lesnar in 2015, 2016-ish.
Yep.
Or 2016, whatever it was. Whatever those years were.
Yep. All those years morphed together in WWE, so.
Right. And so that run until his retirement recently, the guy proved he could draw. And he was still a draw. And yeah, there was some catastrophic decisions around there, like the match with Taker in Saudi Arabia and all that.
Yep.
But you look at the overall body of ability to draw, and I think the case is there. He's one of the biggest draws ever from the 90s. Like it was like him and Steve Austin.
Yep.
And
it really was a 1-2 during that time.
1998. It was him and Steve Austin.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe Sting. Like that's it.
Yep.
For the absolute top draws. And I think the case is strong enough from that alone to make that argument, because but yeah, I would not hesitate to vote Goldberg in. It was just this year I felt like there was candidates who needed the vote more.
Yeah, there were better candidates in your mind in that case, and I totally understand. And so yeah, I would
vote for Goldberg. I would vote for Goldberg if I had more votes.
Yeah, I think he's somebody that if I have a ballot, and we'll see what happens the next year, who knows, but I would be looking at Bill Goldberg, and again, not looking at it from a work rate standpoint, but more from a drawing standpoint, and even to an extent an influence case when it comes to Bill Goldberg.
100%.
So I think there's an argument there. And then other names I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I think FTR is on the brink. I think they're very close for me in terms of somebody I would vote for. It's mainly for the in-ring work and really being one of the focal tag teams of their era.
Yes.
Obviously, the last couple of months in WWE doesn't help them, but them going to AEW certainly helps them a lot. And this current
AEW run has done tremendous work in helping them.
And this current run that they're on right now with Big Stokely Hathaway guy over here
good.
is very, very good. So
I like I know there's some folks who don't like Dax and Cash for whatever reason, and that's fine. There's very legitimate reasons for that. But as performers, they're very entertaining.
Yeah.
And I will say, Brody King punching through that door and scaring Stokely Hathaway on Dynamite is like my Dynamite moment of the year.
There you go. Yeah.
I laughed so hard. I rewound it and watched it like 6 times.
Yeah. Oh man. So
good.
So that's a team I'm keeping an eye on. And then other names I look at here, I don't see much of an argument for Edge, Adam Copeland. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer personally. Randy Orton is an interesting case because he's like
he's another one that's on the brink, right?
Yeah.
Like he's just about there, and his longevity is probably what will eventually put him over the top. I do think he's going to go in eventually.
Me too. And I won't like it, just for the record, but I think
that's
he'll
fair.
go in.
That's fair. And I actually think Edge is probably going to go in eventually too. I just don't think it's going to be while he's active.
Yeah. Because there's still more of a case to be put there with Edge. The problem I have with Adam Copeland is that he's kind of TV ratings death in a lot of cases. I've seen like the quarter hours
so
he's
strange
been in,
too, right?
Yeah, and yet he gets all these big reactions in the buildings, and it's just odd, right?
And he has good matches.
Yeah,
like,
he's not a bad wrestler at all.
Even now he has good matches.
Yeah.
Like the match they had with at the start of All Out when we were there live.
Yep,
that was a great match.
Yeah.
And like the fact that he can still produce to that level with him and Christian, like that's a testament in his favor. So I do think he's eventually going in.
Yeah.
I just don't know if it's going to be while he's an active performer.
Right. And then the case of Orton as well. I think he's one of those guys that the old timers love, but name me a great match other than the Mick Foley match. That's always my argument with Randy Orton. He's always somebody that he's so like the idea of Randy Orton I get, but when you actually see him in practice, he never seems to fully accomplish his potential. And that's what frustrates me with Randy Orton.
I would argue he's actually better now since his post-return from injury.
Okay.
Because he just doesn't. He's the old vet that doesn't care,
right?
And so he's actually
a little bit more.
He's a little bit looser in the ring. He's having some good matches. And also he's willing to have a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
It's clear that he's having fun. I thought that match he had with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania that ended with that awesome RKO.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a really good match. Me praising WWE, who would have thought? But
this is
I'm
what
actually...
I bring out of people, Josiah, is that they have to defend things that they don't want to defend.
Right. And to be fair with it, I try to be as unbiased as I can. WWE does actually put on a lot of tremendous matches.
Yep.
And I thought that was a good one a few years ago. When it was probably like 6 or 7 years ago now. When Orton hit that awesome RKO on Seth. But it shows time is fluid.
Yep, for sure.
But and then there's the pandemic sync zone of 3 years where they just all blend into one. But Rollins and Orton had I thought that was a really good match. And so like he's had plenty of good matches, but when I think of great matches, it's the Foley one.
Yep.
And he's never had that kind of like legendary run as the top guy. I think now where he's having more fun doing stuff, and to be fair, I haven't watched. I don't watch modern WWE right now.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I hear, he's been doing fun stuff. So I think he's going to go in eventually. I don't know if he'll be while he's active, but I think the case there'll be a year where there's enough viable votes open that he will get in, and I'm truthfully at that point I will probably vote for him myself.
There you go.
I'm just not there yet.
Yeah, if I ever get a ballot, I will never be voting for Randy Orton personally. So it's gonna be tough. It's a tough sell. You did a great job of selling me on it, but I at this stage I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, and I think we kind of know what he is at this point.
And that's fair. Like he's definitely a WWE Hall of Famer.
Oh, for sure. He's gonna get it there as soon as he retires. Oh yeah, he'll get his ring and all that. So.
And I would actually argue like he deserves to be in that WWE Hall of Fame.
For sure.
He's been one of their top performers for 20 years.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
Does that make him a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame guy? I don't know, but
for some
he's
it
an
does.
Interesting case.
Yeah, for some it does. I will say, but in my opinion, I just don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I think people get enamored with the idea of Randy Orton, but when you actually see him in practice, I just don't. I don't think there's enough there. And then quickly, some quick hitters here. I don't see a case for Drew McIntyre at all. I don't see a case for Seth Rollins at all either. And then
that one's gonna be hard for some people. That one's gonna be a hot take, brother.
Yeah, I know. I'm the low man on Seth Rollins. The thing is like whenever they've put him on top as the lead of a group, it's not really taken off business wise.
No.
He is not a business mover, and I don't personally find his wrestling to be Observer Hall of Fame level wrestler. I think he's a good wrestler, but I don't really see the case for Rollins personally. I know Dave's been keeping on bringing him back on, but I just don't really see a case. And in the case of McIntyre, like I really like Drew McIntyre, but there's nothing really there to analyze.
Yeah, well, he's never really had a top guy run.
Yeah, the top guy run he had was during the pandemic, and
he had one in TNA,
and he had one in TNA.
Was dying.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a case there for McIntyre. I don't think
he's
there's
a great worker.
Oh yeah, he's a great worker. I keep on advocating for him to be pushed better, but in terms of if we're talking about the Hall of Fame of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, I don't think there's a case at all for Drew McIntyre. And then quickly, a tag team that I love watching, but I don't know if there's going to be a strong enough case for them to get in is Rick and Scott Steiner.
Yeah.
I think there's they are my kind of tag team, just purely in the ring, just looking at what they do in their in-ring accomplishments. But and you could make an argument for a time that they may have been the best tag team in the world. But I don't think the longevity is there enough. And
No, they were really only a tag team for like 4 years.
Yeah.
3 or 4 years, and it was off and on in that time period as well.
Yeah.
Like there was injuries and things like that, and I think there's a better argument for Scott Steiner as an individual performer than there is for them as a tag team.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's an interesting. So I love that tag team. I will go back and watch their matches, but I don't know if there's enough there where I could say they are Observer Hall of Fame tag team.
I love watching their old matches.
They're so good. I love them. I went back and watched them against the Miracle Violence Connection with Dr. Death and Terry Gordy. It's like, oh, this rocks. We need more of those kind of matches in professional wrestling nowadays.
If there is an argument for them to be in, it would probably be from their Japan work.
Yes, absolutely.
Ahead of their North American work.
Yes. So that's where I kind of look at. So I think that's a pretty extensive look. I mean, unless you want to break down Bill Dundee, but I see that more as I think he's more of a historical performers candidate.
I think we're getting close to the time of shifting him into the historical performer.
Yeah. I honestly don't know why he's here. I don't know what he's done to qualify himself as a
He's only been on the ballot twice, so it's kind of strange to me.
Yeah.
I would put him in the historical at this point. But.
Yeah. Because I think Bill Dundee, there is a case to be made, and certainly his time in Memphis and
100%,
and as a booker as well for Mid-South too. Like I think there's a case there, but
and actually a lot of the Mid-South booking that people credit to Watts was actually Dundee.
Yep. So
I think there's Dundee and Watts, but it was Dundee.
Yep. Dundee certainly played a part in that. So I think that's a great transition into the historical performers. That was a lot in there about the modern performers and breaking it all down. Well, I think, Josiah, that's a great transition over into the historical performers era candidates. Again, much like the modern performers, you have a maximum of 6 to choose from. I'll go over the names here that are available to pick if you are somebody that's voting on the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. Ole Anderson, Afa and Sika Anawai, Bob Armstrong, Tully Blanchard, and Arn Anderson with J.J. Dillon. That's a very key note there, because J.J. Dillon is also involved with this act for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, June Byers, Wild Bull Curry, Junkyard Dog, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Pampiro Furpo, Black Gordman, and Great Goliath. Archie Mongolian Stomper Goldie, Hart Foundation with Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, Sputnik Monroe, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, Iron Sheik, Sweet Daddy Siki, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, and Kevin and Carrie and David Von Erich are some of the selections. So, Josiah, now it's your opportunity to reveal who you selected in this category.
So a lot of my votes have now changed from last year. There were 7 votes last year, so I am reduced again this year. But 5 of them are the exact same as last year. So June Byers, Wild Bill Curry, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Archie, Mongolian Stomper Goldie, Sputnik Monroe, and then my addition of Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon.
Yes, so we'll save some of the analysis of the other names that people could go back and listen to. I'll link it at the bottom of this podcast episode if people want to listen to the thoughts at the time that you put in. So, but I will ask about Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon. I love this selection here from you, Josiah.
Yes, so I had to double my Canadian picks for in this category.
Yes.
From Archie Goldie to Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon. I had to go with the Maritime guy for Goldie. And, of course, someone from the Quebec and Ontario territories, the Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, who were a violent tag team in the territory days, and were very big draws in their respective, really everywhere they went. They were like these vicious villains.
Yes, it's very interesting to see them, because obviously Mad Dog Vachon is a clear Hall of Famer. I think he was one of the first people in the '96 Hall of Fame when Dave got the Hall of Fame started. So he's a pretty clear Hall of Famer. So it's one of those interesting dynamics with these tag teams where you have some guys that are already in the Hall of Fame. Like in the case of Hart Foundation, Bret Hart's already in the Hall of Fame. It's about their tag team partner, in this case for Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, Paul the Butcher, that you're looking at here. But I think there's a strong case to make for them. Obviously, their work in the AWA is something that you always have to keep in mind of. But a territory that I think continues to kind of go under the radar is their strong work in Montreal and Quebec.
Yep.
And I know I have Pat LaPrade screaming in my ear about Quebec, and he's always been a big promoter of Quebec wrestling. Past guests on This Is Wrestling, of course. But I think Quebec has always been one of the top territories in professional wrestling, and I think it needs to be recognized here. So I love this Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon pick.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and I've learned a lot more about the Quebec territories since in my adulthood, because like I didn't really know a lot about it growing up. I heard a lot about Atlantic Grand Prix in the, growing up as a wrestling fan in the Maritimes. But I learned also Atlantic Grand Prix shared a lot of talent with the Quebec territory. And so, Leo Burke and all those guys would go into the Quebec territory, and they would be doing matches with guys like Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon. And you'd have Stompin' Paul Pellerin here from the Maritimes taking Andre the Giant up into Quebec after they do their Maritime tour. Stompin' Paul's from New Brunswick. Oddly enough, I met Stompin' Paul because I was working in a grocery store at the time, and he came in, and I was his cashier.
Oh wow! So, there you go. What are the odds?
So every time he came in, someone told me who he was, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I got to talk to this guy."
Yeah.
Because the customer after him told me who he was, and then the next time he came in, we started talking about Andre and Macho Man being brought into the Maritime territories and all that.
Yep.
And I got a lot of good stories out of him, just in those short-term conversations at the cash when I used to work at Sobeys. What a small world. And then later on a busy day, I look up and there's Kurgan walking in.
Oh my god! What a duo there. Kurgan is walking into the grocery store that Josiah's working at.
He was very easy to see because he was as tall as the shelves.
Yes. Yes. Kurgan certainly had a distinctive look.
And I see this guy who's towering over you, and I was like, that has to be Kurgan.
Yeah. And sure enough, Kurgan is definitely a defining figure, to say the least.
Yes,
you can recognize
very hard
him.
to miss.
Yes, when it comes to Kurgan.
But in terms of that, that's when I started to become aware of guys like Mad Dog and Butcher.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I knew of the Vachon family, because of Luna Vachon, growing up in the 90s. And then I realized this is actually a really, really important family in Canadian wrestling. And in terms of the Quebec territory, they were massive draws. As top heels, and it's the territories. They probably had a babyface running in there too, but with a name like Mad Dog and Butcher, you're going to be a heel most of the time.
Right.
And they were like encapsulated what territory wrestling was in many ways.
Yeah, it's I love this pick. If I had a ballot, I would vote for them as well. I think they're a defining tag team of the AWA. You might make the argument that Mad Dog was more of the draw, but I think the Vachon brothers are part of the act in the AWA when they were together, dominating through the tag team division there. And then obviously Montreal. I think the Vachon brothers are pretty commonly associated when you speak with people in Montreal. And so, and Quebec for that matter. So I quite like this pick. For those is there something else you want to add there?
Well, I was just going to say, you can say Mad Dog was the draw, but without Butcher in AWA, they wouldn't have been the team that they were.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. I think for those that are listening in, they hear the name of Kevin, Carey, and David Von Erich, the Von Erich brothers, and they wonder, why aren't they being picked? They are pretty synonymous with wrestling history for a lot of people. Where do you kind of stand with the Von Erichs? Because obviously there was the movie that has come out since then, the Iron Claw, and there's been a lot more focus on the Von Erichs, I think, in the last little bit. Ultimately, for you, why were they kind of on the cutting block for you?
So I did vote for them last year, and this year I did not, because I had a choice. Do I choose them or do I choose Mad Dog and Butcher? And my choice was Mad Dog and Butcher in this case. I do think eventually they are going to go in. They're going to curry enough votes to stay on the ballot. but to me, it was like, who is a very clear candidate? And there is enough debate around the Von Erichs and their long-term drawing ability that I thought I have to go with Mad Dog and Butcher this year. But if I'm not going to rule out voting for the Von Erichs again in the future, but they're one of those ones that's right on the line. And it's unfortunate because WCCW and the Von Erich family itself was revolutionary for Texas wrestling. And what they did was remarkable. You go back and watch those shows from a production value, you see a lot of the stuff that is done in production now because it was invented in WCCW. Actually, Keith Mitchell was their producer before he went to WCW.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then he went to TNA, then he went to AEW, right? Yep. And then finally retired. So there was a lot of revolutionary stuff for them at the time. And so I think if there was a promotion to go into the Hall of Fame, WCCW would be an easy choice. But the Von Erichs were an important part of that, especially their feud with Michael Hayes and the
Fabulous
Freebirds. The Freebirds.
Yep.
There we go. My brain just did a skip there.
It's all good.
The Freebirds, like that feud was awesome. And I think there is a real argument to be made for them, but I just had to pick the Vachons ahead of them this time.
Yeah, I understand the argument there. The Von Erichs is such an interesting thing because you kind of, when you dig deeper, initially you're like, oh, the Von Erichs, they're so associated with pro wrestling history. But you kind of realize just how short their run was, especially that trio specifically of Kevin, Kerry, and David.
Yes.
And
it was like a year.
Yeah, it was like 83, 82, 83 in early WCCW. But I've heard the argument, and I think it's a compelling argument in terms of, a lot of those guys, they're so closely associated with each other that even when they were doing singles stuff, you still kind of associate with them.
The group.
Yeah, with the group there.
Yeah.
Even when David died, and then you had Kerry challenging Ric Flair for the NWA title and winning a year later. For some, that's still the argument that you're still looking at that trio and what they were able to, the influence that they had. And obviously Kerry drawing a big number against Ric Flair as well for that title.
Yeah. I could buy that argument.
Yeah. And I could buy it too, because they are just so closely associated. And there is the idea of like the Von Erichs are so like associated with pro wrestling history. And you mentioned it with WCCW World Class, where the television standards at the time were like revolutionized in World Class, where it was something completely different in the way that television was presented in that territory. So
their production values were way ahead of the WWF and everyone else.
Yeah, it really is something to go back and watch. It holds up really well when you watch old World Class stuff.
Extremely well.
Because a lot of that stuff you see
from a production standpoint.
Yeah, and it because a lot of that stuff you see that is still being used today in WWE and AEW as well. Like a lot of the modern wrestling production you can trace back to old World Class, which I think makes it for an interesting case of potentially pushing Dave to have Keith Mitchell in the non-wrestler section, but that will be something I'll save for the non-wrestlers discussion. But
yeah, you know what? There's an argument to be made for Keith Mitchell.
Yep, in terms of longevity and being involved with TV and whatnot. So, but in the case of the Von Erichs, it's one of those things where I think for a lot of people, it's like there's got to be some sort of Von Erichs representation here in the Observer Hall of Fame because of the drawing ability against the Freebirds, obviously, and how so closely tied they are with World Class. Like they were essentially World Class Championship Wrestling for a lot of people. So
yeah, and they've been on the ballot for so long that they have to go in eventually.
There has to be a way. There has to be a path forward for them. So, I would be looking at somehow, some way, trying to get the Von Erichs on the ballot, but it's going to be interesting to see how they do this year when it comes to the final results.
To be fair, this specific iteration has only been on the ballot for 4 years, but to some degree, the Von Erichs have been on the ballot forever.
Yeah,
right?
like Kerry was on his own for a time. Kevin was on his own for a time. So and I don't know if David was on his own for a time, but I know for sure Kerry and Kevin were.
Yeah,
So
and they did deserve that single time on it as well.
yeah, especially
And-
Kerry in my mind was an interesting case because
Yes.
you're not really voting for him for Texas Tornado, but you are voting
Oh,
for him.
absolutely not. No.
But you are voting for him in terms of his running world class and then what he was able to do from the late 70s into the mid 80s before he had his foot amputated in that motorcycle accident. So
yes.
I think there was an interesting case individually for Kerry. But now when you have this trio in there, it also makes it an interesting case where they're just so closely associated, and those are the three defining Von Erichs. Sorry, Mike Von Erich, but you're not getting some discussion here on the Observer Hall of Fame. But nonetheless, yeah, so it's such an interesting case with the Von Erichs because at the surface, you're like, oh, they should be in. Then you look a little closer. It's like, oh, it's not as long as you would kind of hope. But then it's also like, you still feel like you got to find a way to get the Von Erichs in the Hall of Fame. So
Yeah. I think at some point they have to go in. There are going to be those guys who constantly end up like I think on that bubble, and in one of these years something's going to put them over the top.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at the public Hall of Fame tracker for people who release their results publicly, like myself. And right now they're sitting at 52.31% of the vote, which means they're going to stay on the ballot again.
Yep.
And so they might not go in this year. They might go. We'll see. The tracker is obviously not representative of all the voters.
Yeah.
It's only the ones who make it public. But so they could go in this year. But I suspect they will not. But within the next 5 years, probably.
I could see it for sure.
Probably.
Yeah. So other names I wanted to look at when it came to the historical performers, I think another Canadian, well, not really Canadian, but made his name in Canada is Sweet Daddy Siki, who passed away earlier this year. He's a guy that I want to learn a little bit more about. I know there's that documentary that's out there about Sweet Daddy Siki, but he was a prominent name in Toronto, and especially the club scene as well. He was a pretty prominent name. He was always performing. He's a singer outside of being a wrestler. And he was.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
okay, so I've learned something new.
Yeah, so he was somebody that that you would always find at the clubs. Now, I'm not saying he had like a record, if I recall, but he was definitely somebody that would travel and perform at different clubs in Toronto. He was very well known there, and then obviously he was associated with Maple Leaf Gardens too, and so he's a guy I want to dig in a little bit more on. Like I don't know if he was like a main event guy or if he was someone that was prominently featured, because I think there is a difference there, especially when we're talking about the Hall of Fame. Like you can be a prominently featured guy, but you're not the main event guy, and especially in the cases of Maple Leaf Wrestling, during that time it was the Sheik was a popular figure in Maple Leaf Wrestling in the late 60s and into the 70s. So somebody I want to learn a little bit more about. I'm hoping he could stay on the ballot a little bit. Just to really kind of get a sense. But right now, like, he was somebody that, like, he was prominent in media, like, going around talking with different areas, and a singer has mentioned before, and known to be in the clubs as well. So, an interesting name, debut on the ballot, and I hope he's able to stick around so that maybe we could, like, dig a little bit deeper onto Sweet Daddy Siki. And then other names as well. That I wanted to look at. I think for some of our listeners, Iron Sheik is on here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's much of a case here for Iron Sheik. He's just the guy that lost to Hulk Hogan that set up the massive run for the WWF afterwards. I don't think there's really much of a case there unless there's something drastic that I'm missing here, Josiah.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with you. I suppose there is an argument for stuff pre-WWF where he was a pretty good drawing heel in the territories.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things where he's an interesting candidate, but he's mostly known for losing to Hogan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think that there's more to him than that? Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I don't want to nullify like what he did beforehand, but I think it's just in terms of what he's commonly associated with. In terms of peaks, like that's the one for me is when he was WWF World Heavyweight Champion in between the Bob Backlund reign and the Hulk Hogan reign. But you can maybe make an argument of being, the world champion for the biggest territory in New York during that time, but I don't think it's a strong enough case for me personally because he was not there for very long. So that's where I kind of stand with the Iron Sheik. And then obviously, like, there's the stuff outside of wrestling, of course, where he was on Stern and all that, but I don't think there's really much of a case here for the Iron Sheik.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think he's more known for being an internet meme than he is anything else nowadays,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because he was actually a lot more than that as a performer.
Mhm.
But his rise to fame in the internet was in the early 2000s, where he said a lot of really offensive things.
Yep.
And I go, I actually kind of felt bad for him in that time because it was clear that he was, dealing with issues.
Mhm.
And then that was catapulted into a successful Twitter account run by his nephews.
Yeah.
And
It's amazing how many people still think that was him himself that's got a Twitter app on his phone and he's tweeting all that stuff.
Right. And then of course, it was very sad when he passed away because I mean, like he is a performer that needs to be in the discussion for historical stuff.
Mhm.
But I don't think there's a case for him, at least right now. Not when there's so many other viable candidates. There might be a time down the line where we can safely vote him in, kind of like how Paul Orndorff was on the ballot for like 20 years before he got in.
Yep.
There might be something like that going on, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Another name I want to look at here quickly, Ole Anderson is a fascinating name.
That is an interesting case. I was really debating whether or not I should vote for him.
All right, because I think he's a great worker. Like going back and watching him, and obviously there's the case for his booking 2 territories at once during that time. That's always gets brought up with Ole Anderson.
And he was a great promo.
And not exactly somebody I would want to talk to outside of professional wrestling.
No.
Not exactly the friendliest person.
With him in real life.
Yeah. Not exactly the friendliest person in professional wrestling was Ole Anderson. A bit of a curmudgeon, to say the least. But
even the people who liked him didn't like him.
Yes. he made it very known how he thought about certain professional wrestlers. And where the business was going. But in terms of just his work, like, I think there's a really strong working case here. If you put him into the non-wrestler section, I think there's also a strong case there. It's interesting. He's somebody that's kind of on the edge for me too, because I think you make the booking case, obviously what he was able to do, bouncing around, booking 2 territories with Jim Crockett and Georgia Championship Wrestling, if I recall, were the 2 territories he was booking at the same time. And some of the work he put in there, and then obviously bouncing around and doing different work in the ring as well. He's a very interesting case.
And you have like a lot of good booking in that, and you have a lot of bad booking too.
Yep. I know Ole liked to put himself over as this great booker, but he was not the greatest booker at times in terms of his run.
Well, especially when you consider the booking he did in WCW in the like late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
I believe he was the booker when we had Ric Flair as the Black Scorpion.
Yep. He was the one who voiced the Black Scorpion, if I recall.
Yes, he was. That's right.
Yeah.
And that was a terrible storyline.
Yep. Not very good.
And part of the reason why WCW ended up being on such a massive decline going into the 90s.
Yep.
And of all people to turn it around, it was Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, which is also interesting. Has Bischoff been on the ballot before? I think he might have been.
Probably.
Is he in the Hall of Fame and I'm just not aware of it?
You know what? I'll look that up right now.
Yeah, I'm searching up right now too. But while we both kind of search it up, no, he is not in the Observer Hall of Fame.
Okay.
But I'm sure he's been on as somebody to vote for.
I think what hurts Bischoff is that it was only 2 years.
Yeah.
And
a very hot 2 years,
did,
but 2 years nonetheless.
And then everything else he did was terrible.
Yes. He was at TNA, and then he had a fun run as the general manager for WWE on Raw.
That is true. As a performer, he might be able to get in.
Yeah, but
because he is a tremendous heel performer.
Yes.
I will give him credit on that.
So But in the case of Ole, like, yeah, there's an interesting case here with him. I could see why people would vote for him. Again, he's not going to win People Pleaser of the Year awards or anything like that, but he is certainly going to be somebody in terms of his work in the ring, what he was able to deliver in the ring. I think he was such a strong worker of his day, and a great promo, as you mentioned. And then obviously somebody that was also a booker for quite a few different promotions, and some with varying degrees of success.
And the Horseman wouldn't be the Horseman without him.
Yep, absolutely. So a very
Like,
interesting case there.
An essential part of Ric Flair's early run in the Horseman.
Yeah. And then the final set of names here, I'm going to mention 2 tag teams before we move on to the non-wrestlers category. I'm going to mention British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid, and Davey Boy Smith. That's a name I constantly hear brought up, and they get high vote numbers, and I think it's more for their influence in the ring. And I will tell you this. I know of like wrestling trainers that like they tell their students, if you want to study, pro wrestling tag team matches, you watch British Bulldogs matches on how you work.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely a strong influence case there. And certainly an in-ring case as well. I don't know if there's enough there for me to really take it over the top if I were voting to have them go in the Hall of Fame, but the influence case is pretty interesting when it comes to the British Bulldogs.
Yes, I think there's a viable case to vote for them. But honestly, this category was the hardest one for me to vote in.
Yeah.
Because there's so many good reasons to vote for those guys, and all the other ones that we talked about too, to a certain degree. Especially Ole and all that. You watch Dynamite Kid and British Bulldog as a team, especially their early matches, and you go that holds up with today, and that's insane.
Yeah.
They were very ahead of their time, and of course, because of the steroid abuse and other things like that, they paid the physical price for it, especially Dynamite Kid.
Yep.
You look into how they work though, and you see the influence that's there, and modern tag team wrestling is very much so reflected in how they work.
You can really see it in a lot of matches nowadays where you could see a lot of influence from Dynamite and Bulldog from their matches. So that was another name I wanted to bring up in terms of a potential case. And the other one for me that's going to be, I think when they were here, the 2 tag teams, there's like, oh, Zach's going to say Hart Foundation because he's a big Bret Hart guy, but I'm not going to say Hart Foundation.
I know which one you're going to say.
I'm going to say Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood is a team that's very interesting. You look at Mid-Atlantic at that time, and that was a tag team territory, and Steamboat and Youngblood arguably might have been the top tag team of that tag team territory. And
it was their feud with Slaughter and Knodel, which was they had some really good tag matches in that.
Yep, and that drew a lot of money too. Like it was a turn away the crowd sort of main event. In terms of like, there's no money, no more tickets left. We can't and think about this in pro wrestling. We cannot take your money because it is so full. The amount of people that are in there. So to have that for a tag team, and it wasn't just that match either. It was like other tag team matches during that time in Mid-Atlantic in the early 80s. Obviously Steamboat's already in, but it's going to be the case of having Youngblood in there with that tag team. But I think that's a really strong case. And it's a tag team that I would be looking at too.
Yeah, I would not. I'm a little hesitant only because of the other candidates on the ballot, not because of them themselves. Steamboat and Youngblood, they had a tremendous run when they were a tag team, and again, that feud with Slaughter and Knodel was so good. And I remember reading old Observer results, and it would be Slaughter and Knodel versus Steamboat and Youngblood, and all of these different shows, and all of them are doing well. And it's because those guys were great. And people forget, Sergeant Slaughter was quite the worker when he was younger.
Yep.
We often associate him with his later WWF run, but it was actually before that he had his best runs in the AWA. And the guy could go. He could move. He was a great worker. And then you added, of course, Ricky Steamboat, one of the greatest workers of all time. I mean, his stuff has aged so well. You go back and watch some of his older matches with Flair and all that; they're still really good. And still tremendous matches, still some of the greatest matches of all time. And that team with Jay Youngblood, while it was not a long-lived tag team between the two of them, they produced so many good matches in that time frame that I think you can make a pretty strong argument.
For sure, for sure. I said those were the last two, but I also wanted to quickly mention Junkyard Dog. He's always somebody that's on the cusp.
Yes.
Not going to get in for work. Kind of similar in my Bill Goldberg case, where he's not going to get into work, but in terms of influence, especially when it comes to opening up doors for black talent.
100%.
But also as a drawing case for Mid-South in the early 80s. So being able to draw the Superdome in New Orleans multiple times, big time figures in the early 80s, I think that is something that you have to take a look at when it comes to Junkyard Dog. I think the thing that holds him back is he didn't have as long of a drawing period as he would like, because obviously he was poached by the WWF as part of their expansion.
Was so fast.
Yeah, and he had a big time decline. There's a reason why you go back and you read old observers and you see in the late 80s, early 90s when he's in WCW, and you see Junk Food Dog being mentioned in those write-ups, because his decline was not strong, was not very good for himself. And so Junkyard
really
Dog's such an interesting case.
Post 85, 86, Junkyard Dog was just never the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're really kind of looking at it from 1981 to 1984 in terms of his peaks. So that's an interesting name there. I think there's a strong case from an influence and obviously a drawing perspective, and I could see why people would vote for him if it was on their ballot.
And I voted for him last year. He was the guy I dropped.
Yep.
And then I swapped out the Von Erichs for the Vachons.
Yep.
Because there is a real argument to be made for Junkyard Dog, but I was like, there's just other candidates I favor more.
Yeah, that were just stronger in your mind than Junkyard Dog in this case. So
yes, yeah.
So that's a name I wanted to make sure we mention as well. Let's go to the non-wrestlers here before we finish up with some of the other territories, because I think there's going to be some extensive discussion on the non-wrestlers. So in this section, this time it's 7 maximum for the non-wrestlers. I'll list them off here. Dave Brown, Zane Bresloff, Bobby Bruns, Bob Caudle, Joe Iguchi, Jim Johnson, Larry Matisick, James Melby, Bill Mercer, Gorilla Monsoon, Rossi Ogawa, Reggie Parks, Morris Siegel, Tony Schiavone, George Scott, Kevin Sullivan, the booker, Kevin Sullivan, not the television person, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Tenay, Ted Turner, Jesse Ventura, Roy Welch, Stanley Weston, Grand Wizard, and Koichi Yoshizawa are all the names there. So now it's time to reveal who you picked there, Josiah.
So I have picked Dave Brown, the commentator from Memphis, Zane Breslov, the guy who booked the venues for WCW and the WWF first.
Yep.
Larry Matzik, commentator and promoter for Wrestling at the Chase. James Melby, journalist. Mike Tenay, probably one of the greatest commentators of all time. Ted Turner, arguably the most influential TV/promoter in wrestling outside of Vince McMahon. And Koichi Yoshizawa, who was the prominent source for Japanese wrestling to all of North America from basically the 70s onward, I think.
Yeah. So if I recall, I don't think there's much change from your non-wrestlers last year.
No, there is not. Dave Brown is an addition.
Okay, so Dave Brown, let's talk about Dave Brown here for a second. And obviously, you mentioned color commentator at Memphis, and Memphis wrestling, obviously big. Lance Russell was really the face of that. One of my favorite announcers to go back and listen to. And you'll hear the argument when it comes to the 2-0, because it wasn't just Lance Russell. Dave Brown was also a color commentator there for a long time in Memphis. But you hear the argument that it was all Lance Russell, like he was the one that kind of carried the broadcast. But you always hear some that for them, when you're watching Memphis wrestling, it wasn't just Lance Russell. It was also Dave Brown that was part of that team. Obviously, you were somebody that is in on the Dave Brown argument.
Yes, yeah. Dave, he had a very unique voice and was an important part of all those broadcasts. I don't really have a lot to say outside of that. Just go watch him at Memphis and listen to him and Lance Russell. Like that's the argument right there.
Yep.
And I really greatly enjoyed when Dave Brown guested in AEW a year or two ago. Maybe it was 3 years ago. I don't know, but it was in the last 6 years since AEW started.
Right.
Dave Brown came on and did guest commentary, and he was still great.
Yes. Still has that great voice.
To be fair, he was older, so he's
yes.
not the same guy, but it was still really nice to see. And and that's actually really when Dave Brown first kind of came into my attention. And I've gone back and learned a lot about him since then. And not only with that, he was like a local news broadcaster and all these kinds of things. So he was very embedded in his community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from that perspective, that and the fact that he was such an important part of the overall presentation of Memphis, that I think that makes him pretty a pretty viable candidate.
Yeah, he's an interesting candidate for sure. And going back and watching old Memphis tapes, like for me, Lance Russell still is one of the best play-by-play guys, and just how he was able to put emotion into stuff was just fantastic. And we need some more Lance Russells in professional wrestling, in my personal opinion. But in the case of some of the other names here, again, a link back down to some of the explanations from last year. That way we're not repeating ourselves too much. So I'll just kind of look at some of the other names here, some of the newer names. One of the new names this year is Gorilla Monsoon, obviously stemming from the book that was released recently. And Gorilla Monsoon's an interesting name because people will obviously look at it from the announcing standpoint, being the voice of the WWF during their expansion nationally, but he was also a key figure behind the scenes in terms of the ownership group of the WWF.
Yes, some folks don't realize when Vince McMahon bought Vince Jr. bought the WWF from his father, he was also buying it from Gorilla Monsoon and a few other people in there. Gorilla was as a wrestler, I don't think not even close to a Hall of Fame level. But as a commentator, in terms of the guy who was there, it was him and Bobby Heenan, really, as for a lot of the major calls in the WWF.
Yep.
In the 80s. And he wasn't a great commentator, but him and Bobby Heenan were a great team. And so there's an argument to be made there for them as a team, I think, more than Gorilla individually. Because as a commentator, he really wasn't that good. But as a duo with Bobby Heenan, they were so funny.
Yeah, a great combo.
And you can go back and watch like Primetime Wrestling. That show sucked. Like let's just be honest. But Gorilla and Bobby were awesome. And it was always funny watching what they would come up with, and them trying to prop each other and break character, get each other to break character. It was just tremendously entertaining.
Yeah.
I don't know if that qualifies as a Hall of Fame worthy run, but I was greatly entertained by them.
Yep. For sure. And they're still, like, for a lot of people, when they look back on those 80s WWF matches, you're not really going back and watching for the matches themselves, because the work rate wasn't especially great in the WWF during that time. You're really going back and listening to some of the commentary with Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby, because it's just some jokes don't age as well, but there's certainly like a lot of comedic influence dynamics there when it comes to both Gorilla and Bobby.
And what I will say with that is that like Bobby was the great heel, and Gorilla was the great indignant babyface of what the heel was saying.
Yep.
Although sometimes Gorilla would bury the talent quite severely as well.
Yes. Talent weren't too happy about that.
There was it was a Brian and Vinny show years and years ago where they were reviewing some primetime wrestling, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like a 19-minute terrible match, and they would have saw it like live at the house show, and then Gorilla and Bobby were doing commentary over it, and they come back into the studio, and it's clear that they're watching the match again, including watching themselves commentate on it, because they want to be able to reference it.
Right.
And like Gorilla's just disgusted at this match.
Oh
and
man.
and it was in those moments that it's like, I feel you, Gorilla. It was like a 19-minute just horrible match that they were airing on this half-hour wrestling show. uh, and uh, and Bobby and Gorilla had to watch it twice,
Oh,
and they were not happy.
oh jeez. Oh man. That is some classic WWF stuff right there.
Oh gosh, it's just in those moments you sympathize with them,
Right.
and they're trying to make it entertaining, right?
Yep.
Because that's their job as commentator. And when they came back, I think it was partway through the match, and they're both just burying the match.
Oh man. Oh, I love it. I love it.
It's so awesome.
So, does that make them Hall of Fame worthy? We'll leave it up to
No.
you, but it certainly makes it for a lot of people. I think there is that case, and you can make the argument in terms of behind the scenes too with Gorilla Monsoon in terms of
Yeah.
being part of that ownership group. I think that helps him a lot.
And then be involved in with the booking,
Yep.
and he was the producer for all the shows
Yep.
up until his death.
For a big time, for arguably the top territory as well. I think that's a pretty strong
Yeah.
case when it comes to
Yeah.
Gorilla. So that's going to be interesting to see how the voters kind of view him now in this lens. Now that the book has also been released as well.
I really think the biggest argument for him is away from the commentary and for his ownership, his booking, his production.
Yep.
His work as an agent when agents were brand new.
Mhm.
Like there's a reason why it's called the Gorilla position.
Yep.
And he's the one who was in Gorilla all the time, helping produce the matches. And so a lot of the stuff that was produced by the WWF from the 80s straight through to the late 90s before he passed away was produced by him.
Yep, for sure.
And so there's a real argument to be made there in that regard.
Mhm.
And I think the book will probably help people think about that a little bit more.
Mhm.
But we'll see.
We'll see what happens when it comes to the results. Other names I wanted to quickly mention that I think are interesting. George Scott is a very interesting name. It's kind of the tale of two bookers when it comes to George Scott, because you have the successes when it comes to his run in Mid-Atlantic, being part of really that peak we were talking about, the Don Kernodle, Sergeant Slaughter versus Ricky Steamboat, Jay Youngblood match. He was the booker during that time for Mid-Atlantic. So he was the head of that time during some real strong peaks for Mid-Atlantic. Plus, he was somebody that was brought in for the WWF expansion, as we were just talking about with Gorilla Monsoon, being part of that booking committee and being part of the rise of the WWF during that time, specifically with WrestleManias 1 and 2. And so you have that element when it comes to George Scott, and you have these highs with him, and then you look the other part of his run later on when he comes back to WCW, and he just has a disastrous run there in the late 80s. That he's clearly out of touch with what was going on with modern wrestling at that time, and was quickly brought out. And then he tries to start his own company as well that didn't work out. I believe he was also brought into World Class near the end of World Class, and then we obviously saw what happened there. So the interesting thing with George Scott is that there's a lot of highs with him. Like, the highs are pretty high, but the lows are very low when it comes to his runs booking. You could also make an argument, because he was Canadian as well, that he also had some stints with Maple Leaf Wrestling as a booker. He was also a worker in his day too, but obviously we're looking at it from a pure booking standpoint. So a very interesting name that I think it depends on how you look at it. Like, you're either going to look at his high positives, which, when it comes to his booking of the Mid-Atlantic territory in the late 70s, early 80s, and helping out with the rise of the WWF in the mid 80s, or you're going to look at the failures when it comes to his return to WCW later, and then his run in World Class, and then trying to start his own promotion that ultimately doesn't succeed. So George Scott, an interesting name there as well, that I'm interested to see what the results will be when it comes back.
Agreed. I think that I don't think it's going to be the last time we see him on the ballot. I think there's going to be, well, you usually get a few years on the ballot once you're on it.
Yep.
So It would be interesting to see as people also kind of go back and evaluate his case to see where they fall on that.
Yeah, he's an interesting name for me because the highs are so high, but the lows are also very low. And
Yeah, I mean that's the excellent point right there, right? And it's the similar arguments that you get with other bookers. Like, well, it's actually not that dissimilar to the Ole Anderson argument.
for sure.
Where the highs of his booking were really great and the lows were really bad.
Yes. So an interesting name there. And then somebody else wanted to quickly mention too, Jesse Ventura is in the non-wrestler category this year. I think there's an argument to be made of him getting voted in mainly for his color commentary work because there really isn't. He's kind of built the archetype of the heel color commentator.
Yeah, and speaking of Gorilla again, it was him and Gorilla, right?
Yep. They were duo
and they were good.
Yep.
Well, Jesse especially.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't like his WCW run, but I actually like Jesse Ventura's WCW run with Jim Ross and with Tony Schiavone. I thought he did really good.
Well, it was funny listening back because you could tell he gets well with Schiavone, but he does not get along well with Jim Ross.
Oh, 100%.
It's hilarious to listen to because Jim Ross likes to lead the broadcast. And that kind of is a bit of a guffaw for Jesse Ventura, who's a big personality in his own right. So,
yes.
But with Tony, it's a very interesting dynamic for sure.
Yeah, because it's clear that him and Tony got along really well.
Yep.
Overall, and they played off each other well. Whereas Jim and him, it felt like a battle. But on the other hand, that actually played fairly well when it's the baby faces versus the heels.
Mm-hmm.
And so it didn't make the commentary bad. It actually made it interesting. But there's an argument there. But obviously, his primary run as a commentator was in the WWF with all the Saturday Night's main events and all that. And he's another legendary voice. I think there's a real argument to be made for Jesse Ventura.
So those are a lot of the non-wrestlers I wanted to discuss. And so let's try and rapid fire through some of the Japan, Mexico, and the Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, Africa region. That's a bit of a mouthful in the last region, but we will try and get through all these in a rapid fire. Let's start with Japan. This one is 3 maximum. The choices this year: Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Yoshiaki Fujiwara, Hayabusa, Masaki Mochizuki, Antonio Inoki, and Seiji Sakaguchi. Zack Sabre Jr. is in the Japan category. Meiko Satomura, Io Shirai / Io Sky, Tiger Jeet Singh, Yoshihiro Takayama, and Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada. In this selection. 3 maximum for this one. Who are your picks there, Josiah?
So I picked Yoshizaki Fujiwara, who was one of the founders of the UWF, the shoot style pro wrestling when he separated from the, I believe it was New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
My brain is failing me at the moment.
No, you're correct.
Hayabusa, same argument as Sabu, and same argument I had last year for influence. And then I picked Io Shirai because I believe she is one of the most prominent modern women's wrestlers from Japan. And I think she's one of the most influential, and her body of work is incredible. Before WWE, even, I think there was an argument, but she's still so young. She just turned 35.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I have no problem voting for her. I believe she's the first ballot Hall of Fame worthy talent. I believe she is the modern Manami Toyota.
Wow. All right.
It's her and Mayu Iwatani and Kairi Sane or Kairi Hojo to another degree. Those 3. I would have no hesitation voting for all 3 of them.
Wow. Okay. I was not expecting the Manami Toyota comp, so that is going to be interesting there. So, what's interesting is for me is that Zack Sabre Jr. is on this list, and I look at Zack Sabre Jr. as one of the best wrestlers in the world.
Absolutely.
And so I assume he was kind of on the cutting block there for you. So what made you decide Io Shirai over Zack Sabre Jr. in your mind?
It was actually, I decided Fujiwara over ZSJ.
Okay, interesting.
And,
Fujiwara over ZSJ, interesting.
Because the UWF ended up being so influential.
Yeah.
And it's less to do with because Sabre is going to be on the ballot again.
Yep.
And it was like, who do I pick right now? I suppose Shirai will be on the ballot as well again. So there's really, honestly, I could have voted for Zack Sabre Jr. and it would have been fine with replacing probably any one of these guys with Sabre, because I do believe he's one of the best wrestlers alive today, and he's carrying New Japan through a very rough time as their top foreigner, and he's probably going to continue in that role going forward for the next few years. So I do worry that he's not going to get the recognition he should, based on the fact that he's probably not going to be going to AEW, at least for another 2 or 3 years. And by that time he'll be, in his late 30s. He's still a fairly young man. I think he's 36, 37, something like that.
Yep, sounds about right.
But yeah, that was a hard choice for me, because I do believe Sabre should go in. And in terms of the body of work he's done in Japan, especially as now solidified as the top foreigner in New Japan, he is very close to being put over the top in that. And I do think he should go in eventually. I mean, you look at the quality of matches he's had in New Japan, and he's up there with the best of the best. Like, you look at the quality of body of work that guys like Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay and Jay White and others had in Japan, and he's right there with those guys in the same quality of work. It just doesn't gather the same amount of attention. So I think there's a real argument to be made for Sabre.
Yeah, that's interesting, because to me, I think Sabre's in-ring work puts him into the Hall of Fame category on that alone. I know he had the title. He didn't have the greatest main event with all of a sudden I'm blanking on his name.
Shota Umino?
Shota Umino, that's right. And he didn't have the greatest main event there, but I put that more on Umino than I do Zack Sabre Jr.
Yes. And
so, interesting. Yeah, and in the case of Io Shirai, the comp to Manami Toyota, that's very high. I enjoy Io Shirai. I don't know if I would go that far personally in terms of the Manami Toyota comp, but certainly I think in terms of women's wrestlers purely in-ring, one of the best that has come through. Obviously working in Japan, now working in the States.
Yeah. I knew that was a bold comparison when I was thinking that.
Yep.
And to be fair, that's a hard legacy and name to live up to.
Yep.
Because Manami Toyota is still one of the greatest ever.
And also on this ballot too as the tag team.
With the tag team, yes. So that is, I know that's a very bold comparison. And so, but on the other hand, she has such a high level body of work that I think it's a fair comparison. Is it a 1-to-1 comparison? No. But is it a fair one? I think so.
Interesting. I like that. This is what I'm talking about. Bringing the takes here on This Is Wrestling. And so another name that I think we both agree on here is Hayabusa. I think a lot of the case you can make for Sabu, you can make with Hayabusa, and even in the case of Hayabusa, I think an underrated wrestling draw as well.
Absolutely.
For his time
for
in
FMW.
Yeah.
Hayabusa, again, it's the same argument that I had last year when I voted for him. It's pure influence. I mean, who else who's led to people like Will Ospreay walking out wearing a Hayabusa mask?
Yep.
And you had all these people who were heavily influenced by him. Going back to the 90s with like guys like Jack Evans in the late 90s, early 2000s. I believe Jack Evans for one point was calling himself Hayabusa 2, I think.
Yeah. And there's a new Hayabusa out there right now too.
Yes.
That's literally a carbon copy of the original Hayabusa. It's crazy.
Yes, it is actually remarkable how much he looks like him.
Yeah, and wrestles like him too. It's
and
insane.
Wrestles like him. It's quite remarkable.
The same mannerisms and everything.
It's actually kind of eerie.
Yes. Scary.
But yeah, it's you look at the overall influence of Hayabusa, and I think it's a no-brainer. It's the same argument for Sabu, and it's funny because both of them came up around the same time. Although Sabu's a little older.
Yeah.
But you look at the stuff they did in Japan, and it's like those two in terms of they're kind of like very similar careers, very similar influence. Both did weird ultra violent stuff, but also incredible athletic stuff. The argument's very similar.
It's very interesting. The arguments there for Hayabusa, but I'm in on Hayabusa. Again, a lot of strong influence case and underrated drawing case as well. And so I think that's a guy that I look at as well. The only other name I wanted to mention in Japan was Tiger Jeet Singh. Not because, again, similar to Bill Goldberg in the sense, and I think he's a worse wrestler than Bill Goldberg, and that's saying something. Tiger Jeet Singh is like one of the worst in-ring professional wrestlers you'll ever see. And you might be hearing that, it's like, well, then why is he in contention for the Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame?
He was a draw.
He was a big time draw. Everywhere he went, like Canada, he was a draw in Maple Leaf Wrestling, a big time draw in Japan. He drew pretty decently as well in the US, but not as big as like Canada and Japan. And that's the case for Tiger Jeet Singh, really, is that he is a recognizable name in Japan. He is like there for a lot of people when it comes to like Brody and Stan Hansen and Abdullah the Butcher, even the Sheik to an extent when he was there in Japan. He is kind of, for a lot of people, he's up there. He has that legendary feud with Inoki. Again, I'm not putting him in there for his in-ring work. And if anything, his in-ring work might be a detriment to him getting into the Hall of Fame because he is an awful professional wrestler. Like, legitimately one of the worst. And so I think that's why you see some people being put off by him voting for him, because it just feels bad to vote for him. But
honestly, though, if I had 5 votes in this category, my other 2 choices would be Zack Sabre Jr. and Tiger Jeet Singh.
Yeah, because the drawing case is just so strong, right? If like that's what you're really voting Tiger Jeet Singh for, is the drawing capability. Because you're not really voting for him for anything else. Influence, you can maybe make an argument, but I think the influence case is stronger with guys like Brody and Butcher and Stan Hansen in terms of being influential to Japan.
Absolutely.
But in terms of drawing, like it's a hard case to go against when it comes to Tiger Jeet Singh.
Agreed.
So again, I feel bad saying it, just for the record, because again, not the greatest wrestler in the world. But
but you know, this is one of those things where those are the 3 categories we have to consider: drawing, influence, and longevity, right?
Yep. And for some, it's like most outstanding in a particular category, and for some, that's Tiger Jeet Singh.
And of course, in-ring work as well. Those are the kind of the four things you need to evaluate.
Yep.
And as far as it goes for drawing, Tiger Jeet Singh was a massive draw.
Yeah.
Not a great worker, but a big draw.
Yeah, for sure. And I will do my yearly. I don't think he's gonna get in, but I love Yoshihiro Takayama. That's all I will say about Yoshihiro Takayama.
Yeah. I felt bad. Honestly, he's probably going to get enough votes to do. He's going to be on the ballot for a while.
Yeah.
He might get in eventually.
Yep.
But I don't think he will. But Takayama was so much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Both from his MMA and his pro wrestling.
They still talk about it. It's Fry versus Takayama, right?
The Don Fry Takayama spot.
Yeah.
Where you just grab each other and start punching.
Yeah.
Which is funny because it started in a shoot fight. That was a real fight. But that fight was more pro wrestling than most pro wrestling matches.
It rocked. I love that fight. As you mentioned, it was so pro wrestling, but it was so good.
And I will say too, that benefit show they did for him, where Minoru Suzuki challenged him to a match and said, "We won't fight until you can get out of that chair." And everyone's crying, including Suzuki.
Yep.
That was something.
Yeah, that is an incredible moment.
I'm still thinking on it now. Like, I'm emotional thinking about it because it was such a beautiful moment. And Suzuki walks up and hugs him, and it was like, sometimes pro wrestling is awesome.
Yep.
Like with good people. That was an example of it right there.
Yeah.
And it was just so heartwarming to see them do that for him. And he, I mean, we know he's probably never going to walk again, but for goodness sake, he's trying.
Yeah. For sure.
So he's a very inspirational guy.
Yeah.
I hope people consider him, not because of anything really he's done in pro wrestling. He's never really been like a major draw or anything like that. I shouldn't say that. He's been a pretty good draw.
Yeah.
And he was a decent worker
Yeah.
and all that, but it was just more the guy himself is such an inspirational guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's going to get in, but my heart's there with him.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with a lot of that. So the next couple of candidates, you'll have to fill in the blanks for me because these are not areas I'm very strong in. So when we go to Mexico, I'm going to ask you to fill in the blanks for some of these guys because Mexico is something that's kind of out of my purview. I've been trying to watch more Mexico in recent years with the rise of CMLL and Mystico being back on top, but so some of these you'll have to fill in the blank for me. But I will list off the names again, 3 maximum like in Japan. Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner, Sangre Chicana, El Dandy. Who are you to doubt El Dandy? There we go. I got that joke in.
I, for one, have never doubted El Dandy.
There you go. Although we might see in the selections that might be a little different. Who knows? But
that's true.
But El Dandy, who are you to doubt El Dandy? Got that joke out there. Jarrell Dixon, Gran Hamada, Los Infernales, which is El Santanico, and Pirata Morgan and MS1. El Hijo del Santo and Octagon, La Parca, the AAA version, Masquerita Sagrada, and Volador Jr. So quickly, just make your selections and why you picked them.
I picked Gran Hamada, and he passed away in February this past year. So I think that's probably why he's on there now, although he's been on it a few years.
Yep.
And then there El Hijo del Santo and Octagon and Volador Jr. So Volador Jr., my argument's the same as last year. He's just been a consistent top draw in Mexico, in CMLL forever.
Yep.
And if guys like him and Ultimo Guerrero and all that, I see him in a similar way, although Ultimo Guerrero is obviously in his own unique category.
Yep.
But the reason I chose Gran Hamada, he was actually more known in Mexico, but he was a Japanese professional wrestler.
Yep.
But he wrestled for New Japan, the UWF, Michinoku Pro, All Japan. He founded ULL, Universal Lucha Libre. He wrestled in the WWF and ECW. He has daughters who still wrestle in Mexico and Japan. He's related to Pentagon Black and Silver King and Tiger Mask the Fourth. Those guys are his ex-son-in-laws. I believe he helped train Ultimo Dragon. This is a guy who's been all over pro wrestling. And in terms of him being a Hall of Famer, I think there's a pretty strong argument there. Just from the fact that he trained a lot of people. You look at all the titles he won around the world, how many drawing hair versus hair matches he had, and all of that from the back in the day up to the 90s and whatnot. I mean, this guy was consistently a very good wrestler for a very long time, and then he also has a family of wrestlers around him, that his own family. And he was the first to adopt lucha libre into the Japanese professional wrestling style. So he would have an influence on the original Tiger Mask and things like that as well. And so I think there's a lot of argument from an influence perspective there, and the fact that he had a lot of longevity as well. I just think the argument is there for him. I may be wrong on him training Ultimo Dragon, but I think he trained Ultimo Dragon. I will check that actually right now.
I know he trained a lot of wrestlers, and he's credited with the style you see in Dragon Gate too, where that combination of lucha libre with puroresu. And I recall Gran Hamada in the 6-man tag at Barely Legal.
Yes.
That's how I recognize Gran Hamada,
I believe.
So,
and yes, he was trained by Gran Hamada.
Okay,
Ultimo
there you
Dragon.
go.
So, and Ultimo Dragon's one of the greatest wrestlers ever.
Yep.
So,
so it feels apropos to put Gran Hamada in there. I've been told to go and watch some old Gran Hamada matches. I will be doing that as part of looking back on him, because apparently when you look at his style, it feels like he's very ahead of his time of a lot of the reviews. So that is going to be on the bucket list to go watch some old Gran Hamada matches. And he's somebody that right now, as we look at the public ballots on the Hall of Fame tracker, he is number one with 76% of the ballot for a lot of people in Mexico. So number one for everybody. So he is clearly somebody that a lot of people are really getting invested in Granada. So I think that's a interesting selection there. I am aware of the team of El Hijo del Santo and Octagon, mainly for their match against Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr at When Worlds Collide. That's like a very influential tag team match there. And people need to go back and watch that too.
I think that if you want to understand them, just go watch that match.
Yep.
And you will understand why people vote for them.
Yes. Very influential tag team match, helped bring Lucha Libre when they were getting hot in the 90s. And so, and you could go back, and Art Barr is credited a lot with kind of helping Eddie Guerrero find his charisma, because at the time, Eddie Guerrero was, somebody that like was a great wrestler, but shocking to think now, but not the most charismatic at that time.
Indeed. He was kind of a white meat babyface.
Yeah, but Art Barr was able to really bring a lot of the charisma out of Eddie Guerrero. And so that's a match people have to go back and watch. That's like one of those influential wrestling matches that people have to go see. And it's a great match.
Latino Heat is just Eddie being more like Art Barr.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
Like more charismatic and all that. And when Eddie did that heel turn in WCW and started to really turn up that disdainful, arrogant charisma that he was known for, for his heel work, and then he translated that into babyface work with I Lie, I Cheat on Steel, and a lot of it was from Art Barr. But that match with El Hijo del Santo versus an Octagon, just go watch it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's tremendous. And you'll understand why they deserve a vote from that match.
Yes. So one last section we're going to look at here, and then we'll be wrapping this episode, this special episode looking at the Observer Hall of Fame. This is wrestling in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, Africa. You could select a maximum of 4. The names are Spiros Arion, Dominic DeNucci, Georgie Gordienko, Steve Gray, Billy Joyce, Les Kellett, Killer Carl Cox, Gilbert LeDuc, Ted Boy Marino, the Royal Brothers of Burt Royal and Vic Faulkner, Adrian Street, Jose Torres, and Otto Vons. And reveal who you selected in this category and why you picked them.
I picked Otto Vons, and largely because I learned a lot about him thanks to Lance Storm telling stories about CWA when he was booked there.
Yep.
And I thought that's enough to earn a vote for me. Killer Carl Cox is an interesting one because he's actually a Maritimer.
Yeah.
And he's in the Europe category because that's where he primarily wrestled in his career. But he's an interesting guy as well. There's an interesting case there for him from a heel in the 50s and 60s, I believe.
Yep.
Although he really did work up until actually I got to look it up. I think he worked into the 80s. Killer Carl Cox, but yeah, he is from the Maritimes. Well, he worked the Maritimes a lot. He's actually American himself, but
but associated his work is associated with the Maritimes and worked there quite a bit, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it was the Maritimes and Europe basically.
Yeah.
He wrestled until, let me see, I think it was 1983. He's an interesting argument to be made because his gimmick was obviously a Nazi.
Yes. Let's address the elephant in the room. That was what his gimmick was.
He which is funny because he actually served in the United States Marine Corps.
Yep.
So he was not a Nazi in real life.
Yeah.
He actually fought the Nazis.
It was a very different time in pro wrestling. There was a lot of there was a shocking amount of Nazi gimmicks in pro wrestling in the 50s and 60s because they were if you wanted a top heel, you would make the wrestler a Nazi. That's how it was during that time.
And then eventually that transitioned to Russians and then whatever else.
Yep.
At least especially in America where they would play off that. And in Japan, when you wanted a top heel, they were American.
Yep.
So
that's right. That's how Ricky Dozan was really able to get over is because he would take a lot of those top names from the States and he would beat them. And the top names would agree to it because word wouldn't get back to the States or whatever that they had lost to this guy in Japan. Plus, they saw the money that was being made in Japan at that time. It was like, oh, if I lose here, I could come back and get some more bookings and make a lot of money in this Japanese territory. And lo and behold, Japan ended up being one of the big territories of that era. So,
yeah. So Cox was a heel in the '60s primarily. He started in 1954, but the '60s was when it was a big run, and it was in Australia, most of it actually. And he would work with other people who were on the ballot right now. You have Spiros Orion, Dominic Nanucci, and others, and they would all work in Australia, and he would like cause riots.
yeah,
It's so quaint now. But his finisher was the Brainbuster. So he would hold the guy upside down for a period of time, and then allow the blood to rush to the brain, and then boom, drop them down in a suplex. And that was, he was a pretty influential guy. So I think there's an argument to be made for him.
Yep.
In terms of like, when I looked at he fought in the Korean War. Looking at it now, I said something about years of service in the Marine Corps, 1944 to 1946, but I don't think he fought in World War II. But anyways, but he did fight in the Korean War apparently.
Yo.
So all that to say that that this was a guy who was not a Nazi, but his gimmick was.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, with the name KKK, right?
It's pretty self-explanatory, yeah.
And wrestling back then wasn't known for its subtlety.
No, it was very in your face about who was the bad guy, who was the good guy, and who you would cheer for and who you would boo. And it would be a lot tougher, let's just say, to try and pull off some of those gimmicks now in modern wrestling.
And deeply offensive, right?
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, he was. He also had. He had like heel groups he worked with in the Australian promotion. So he worked with Abdullah the Butcher, Dick Brower, Tiger Jeet Singh, Waldo Von Erich, and he also worked with Mr. Fuji and others like that as well. So like he was kind of this legendary heel from that time period,
right?
From the '60s onwards, to the point that Killer Carl Cox, I believe, was shouted out as a villain in not himself, but in early Marvel comics. Like him and a few others were referenced by Stan Lee, because Stan Lee clearly was influenced by pro wrestling. But if you go read them, you can hear them, saying, "I haven't seen a fight like this since whatever," and Killer Carl Cox.
Wow, there you go.
And Stan Lee would pepper little wrestling things into the early '60s Marvel's comics every now and then, referencing guys like Killer Carl Cox and others. Which is always interesting to me.
Yep.
But so there is an argument to be made. But yeah, he's an interesting candidate.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting candidates. Again, like Mexico is a little tough for me. This region is like out of my depth when it comes to what's in that region, whatnot. So I think that's going to do it there in terms of coverage of all the guys. And we were extensive here, Josiah, in terms of being able to go through the different areas and who is in the rest of the world, who's in Mexico, Japan, modern U.S., Canada, historical U.S., Canada, the non-wrestlers as well. So by the time I edit this down, I think it's going to be a little over 2 hours of coverage here of the Wrestling Observer. And we'll likely have another episode out once the results actually do come out. I doubt it's going to be as long as the 2 hours that we put in here this afternoon as we record.
No, it definitely shouldn't be.
No, unless we wanted to go fully in depth. It's like, and in 1984, this guy did this, like something like that. But nonetheless, I think we did a good breakdown of everybody, some of the new names that we didn't get a chance to talk about last year. So, Josiah, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being able to come on and talk the Observer Hall of Fame. Especially as we record on the final day of submissions from the Hall of Fame voters. And who knows, next year I will try and get, once I'm not insanely busy running around with my head cut off like a chicken, I will try and put in a word to Dave to see if I could get a ballot as well, and see maybe if I could come in with my own selections. I think I said it last year, and then now I'm saying it again this year, but third time's the charm potentially when it comes to the Observer Hall of Fame coverage. But I do appreciate you coming on, giving your takes and giving your selections, and I think people that were listening in learned something a little bit today.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be there. And as for the plugs of where you can find me at WR Central on BlueSky, and you can read my stuff at WrestlingObserver.com/F4WOnline.com, where I cover AEW Collision every Saturday.
There you go. So you go over to the Observer site and read the Collision reports there from Josiah. And I know that he will be defending his This Is Wrestling Championship in the near future, I imagine, too. You are chomping at the bit, waiting.
That's right. We got to get that going again.
You've been sending me letters. You've been telling me I'm ready to go. You want to be a fighting champion here. And so
That's right.
I believe it will be coming up pretty soon. We will figure out something for the next little bit in terms of
maybe AEW Full Gear or something like that.
You never know. You never know. We're gonna figure it out and determine the next event. Who knows? We might change it up. You never know. But that
I may
is something to keep an eye on.
catastrophically lose this title, but we need to find out.
We need to find out at the next show, and that is going to be the tease for the next show. As when will Josiah defend his belt? But of course, thanks again for coming on, and we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming, of course, this upcoming week on the This Is Wrestling main show with myself and Lever Sage, as it's getting close to the end of the year when it comes to wrestling shows. We're already in November, got one more month left, still a couple pay-per-views to go, obviously, but it's slowly coming to an end here, the year 2025, so you'll want to keep on tuned in each week for the latest episode of This Is Wrestling. But for Josiah, I'm Zach McGibbon. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you at the next one.